My son invited me to a reconciliation dinner after 2 years of total silence. I stood on the porch of his Beverly Hills mansion holding a hand-carved wooden cradle for my unborn grandson. But before I could ring the bell, the maid stumbled out the side door, crashing into me. She gripped my arm with a force that bruised her eyes wide with terror. "Run away," she hissed, her voice trembling. "Don't go in there. It is a trap. The police are coming." I trusted the fear in her eyes and stepped back into the shadows. 3 minutes later, a SWAT team kicked down the front door, and I watched my own son point at my empty chair and scream, "My father brought the drugs. He is the one you want. My name is Langston Jefferson. I am 67 years old. For 40 years, I built skyscrapers that defied gravity, but I failed to build a son with a spine. If you are listening to this, you know that family betrayal cuts deeper than any knife. Like and subscribe if you have ever had to cut toxic family out of your life to survive. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. The call that started this nightmare came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was under my 1970 Ford F-100 grease, staining my knuckles, wrestling with a rusted transmission. The garage was my sanctuary, a place of metal and oil far removed from the boardrooms I used to dominate. My phone buzzed on the workbench. The screen flashed a name I had not seen in 730 days. Tyson. I wiped my hands on a rag, staring at the screen. My thumb hovered over the decline button. Tyson only called when he needed money, or when his ego had written a check his bank account couldn't cash. But then the voicemail icon popped up. I played it. Dad Tyson's voice cracked, sounding like the little boy who used to scrape his knees in our driveway. "I know I messed up. I know I haven't been the son you wanted. But Victoria is pregnant. You are going to be a grandfather. I want to fix this. Please come to dinner. I want you to be part of his life." A grandfather. The word hung in the dusty air of the garage. It was a precision strike at the one weakness I had left. I was a man of steel and concrete, a man who had built the Jefferson Steel empire from the dirt up, but the thought of a grandson made my chest tighten. I sat on the cold concrete floor listening to the message again. My instincts, honed by decades of navigating shark-filled corporate waters, screamed that this was a lie. Tyson was a 32-year-old child, a CEO in title only, running a tech startup that burned cash faster than a furnace. He was weak, vain, and married to a woman who looked at me like I was the help. But blood is a heavy chain. I stood up. I would go, but I would not go as a fool. I showered, scrubbing the grease from my skin, but I didn't put on a suit. I put on my work boots, dark jeans, and a thick flannel shirt. I looked like a retired mechanic, which is exactly what I wanted the world to see. Before I left, I walked to the tool chest. I opened the bottom drawer and took out a small folded pocket knife. It was old, sharp, and reliable. I slipped it into my breast pocket. I hoped I wouldn't need it, but I learned a long time ago that hope is not a strategy. I grabbed the gift I had been working on for months, just in case this day ever came. A wooden cradle carved from black walnut, polished until it shone like glass. I drove my beat-up truck out of my modest neighborhood and headed toward the hills. The drive to Tyson's house was a journey between two worlds. I left the solid working-class streets where neighbors knew each other's names and entered the winding, manicured roads of Beverly Hills. The houses here were not homes. They were statements. Tyson's place was a glass and steel monstrosity that looked cold even in the California sun. I knew he couldn't afford it. I knew the lease was likely eating him alive, but appearance was everything to Tyson and his wife Victoria. I parked my truck on the street away from the driveway filled with leased luxury cars. I didn't want my oil leaks staining their pristine pavers. I walked up the long driveway, the wooden cradle heavy in my arms. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree. I could see movement inside. Shadows pacing. It didn't look like a party. It looked like a staging area. I reached the side of the house near the service entrance. That was when the door burst open. A woman stumbled out carrying a heavy bag of trash. She was small, middle-aged, with the weary eyes of someone who has seen too much. It was Rosa. I remembered her. She had worked for Tyson for 3 years, one of the few people who stayed. She saw me and gasped. She dropped the bag, spilling coffee grounds onto the pavement. I stepped forward to help her. "Careful, Rosa," I said, reaching out a hand. She looked at me, then at the house, then back at me. Her eyes widened with absolute terror. She lunged forward, grabbing my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails digging into my skin through the flannel shirt. She wasn't stumbling. She was intercepting me. "Mr. Jefferson, She whispered, her voice a frantic hiss. "Do not go in there." I frowned, trying to pull away gently. "Rosa, what is wrong? Is Tyson okay?" "No." She shook her head violently, tears welling in her eyes. "It is not dinner. It is a setup. The police are coming. They called them 10 minutes ago." I froze. The engineer in my brain started calculating the load-bearing capacity of her words. Police. Setup. Reconciliation dinner. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice dropping to a low rumble. "They put something in the house," she said, speaking so fast the words blurred together. "White powder. In the dining room. They said you brought it. They said you are the supplier." "Victoria is laughing about the insurance money. Please, Mr. Jefferson, run now!" The world stopped. The cool evening breeze felt suddenly freezing. I looked at the glass windows of the mansion. I saw Tyson. He wasn't preparing dinner. He was pacing by the window looking at his watch, sweating. He looked terrified. Victoria was sitting on the sofa checking her makeup in a compact mirror, calm as a viper. I looked back at Rosa. She was risking her job, maybe her freedom, to warn me. I didn't ask for proof. I saw the truth in her trembling hands. "Go," she pushed me. "Go to the trees." I didn't argue. I didn't try to be a hero. I turned and sprinted toward the dense line of cypress trees bordering the property. I moved with a speed I didn't know I still possessed at 67. I crouched in the darkness, the smell of pine and damp earth filling my nose, clutching the wooden cradle to my chest like a shield. 30 seconds later, the night exploded. Blue and red lights flooded the driveway. No sirens, just the silent, lethal approach of a tactical team. An armored truck screeched to a halt where I had been standing just moments ago. Men in heavy gear poured out, rifles raised. Police search warrant opened the door. The front door of the mansion shattered inward. I watched from the darkness, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I heard shouting. I saw the flash of tactical lights sweeping the living room. Then I saw the performance. Tyson and Victoria ran out onto the front lawn, hands raised in mock surrender. Tyson was crying, actually crying. He fell to his knees, pointing a shaking finger back at the house. "He is in there," Tyson screamed, his voice carrying clearly in the night air. "My father. He is in the dining room. He has a gun. He brought the cocaine." Victoria was acting the part of the terrified victim perfectly. She clung to a police officer, sobbing into his vest. We tried to stop him. He threatened to kill us. He said he was using our house for a drop. I watched my son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had put through private school, the boy I had loved more than my own life, try to bury me. He wasn't just inviting me to dinner, he was inviting me to a 20-year prison sentence. He was framing me as a drug lord. The police stormed the house. "Clear room. Clear." I heard them shouting. They came back out a minute later. "The suspect is gone." He fled out the back. Tyson looked up, his face, a mask of genuine panic now. "He can't be gone. He was just here. Find him. He is dangerous." I didn't wait to hear any more. I realized with a cold, hard certainty that my life as Langston Jefferson, retired engineer and father, was over. I was now a hunted man. I crawled backward through the brush, ignoring the thorns tearing at my clothes. I reached the neighbor's fence. It was 6 feet high, chain link. I threw the wooden cradle over first. Then I grabbed the metal links. My shoulders screamed in protest, arthritic joints burning, but rage is a powerful anesthetic. I hauled myself up and over, dropping into the alleyway behind the estates. I landed hard, rolling to absorb the impact. I grabbed the cradle and ran. I didn't run to my truck. They would be looking for it. I ran toward the main road, flagging down a passing taxi with the desperation of a man drowning. To the airport, I told the driver, keeping my head down. But I wasn't going to the airport. I needed him to drive me to a motel in the seediest part of downtown, a place where they took cash and didn't ask for ID. As the city lights blurred past the window, I didn't cry. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a cold, mechanical clarity. Tyson didn't know who he had just declared war on. He thought he was framing a lonely old man. He forgot that I was the one who built the foundation he was standing on, and I was the only one who knew how to bring it all crashing down. I sat on the stained mattress of the motel room, the neon sign outside buzzing like an angry hornet. I placed the wooden cradle on the table. It was beautiful. a labor of love. I ran my hand over the velvet lining I had installed inside. Wait, I felt something. A lump beneath the velvet. My heart skipped a beat. I pulled out my pocket knife and sliced open the fabric. A plastic bag slid out. White powder, about 4 ounces. I stared at it, my blood turning to ice. I realized when it happened. On the way to Tyson's house, I had stopped at a gas station to buy a bottle of water. I had left the truck unlocked for 2 minutes. Victoria's car had been parked across the street. I remembered seeing it but didn't think anything of it. She must have slipped this into the gift while I was inside. They hadn't just set a trap at the house. They had planted evidence on me before I even arrived. If the police had stopped me on the way there, I would have been caught with a felony amount of narcotics. This wasn't just desperation. This was malice. This was evil. I flushed the powder down the toilet, watching the white swirl disappear. Then I turned on the small grainy TV in the corner. The news was already on. Breaking news, the anchor announced. A manhunt is underway for Langston Jefferson, a suspected drug trafficker operating out of Beverly Hills. Police raided the home of his son, tech entrepreneur Tyson Jefferson, earlier tonight. Tyson Jefferson is appealing for his father to turn himself in. The screen cut to Tyson. He was standing in front of his mansion looking shattered. "I don't know who he is anymore," Tyson sobbed into the microphones. "I tried to help him. I tried to get him into rehab. But he turned on us. He is a monster." I turned off the TV. The remote cracked in my hand as I squeezed it. Monster. They wanted a monster, fine. I would become the monster they feared, but not the one they invented. I would be the monster of their financial nightmares. I checked my wallet. I had $2,000 in cash. My credit cards were likely already flagged. My bank accounts would be frozen by morning. I was a ghost. But ghosts can walk through walls. I pulled a burner phone from my bag, something I had bought at a liquor store on the way here. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 10 years. It rang once. "Jerome," I said, when the line clicked open. "Langston." The voice was deep, gravelly. "It's 2 a.m. You better be dying or buying." "Worse," I said. "I need the war room." There was a pause. I heard the rustle of sheets, then the sound of feet hitting the floor. "I saw the news, Langston. I figured you'd call. I'll bring the armored SUV. Meet me at the extraction point. Jerome Banks." The best criminal defense attorney in the state, and the only man who knew where all the bodies were buried because he helped dig the graves. But more importantly, he was the only one who knew my biggest secret. Tyson thought I was living off a pension and some savings. He thought I was a retired engineer with a modest nest egg. He didn't know about Atlas Holdings. He didn't know that the venture capital firm that funded 40% of the tech startups in the city, including his own, was not a faceless conglomerate from Zurich. It was me. I was the silent majority shareholder. I was the money behind the curtain. Tyson had just tried to frame the man who owned his debt, his company, and his future. I grabbed my bag and the ruined cradle. I walked out into the night. The air smelled of rain and exhaust. My son wanted a war. He wanted my money. He wanted me dead or in a cage so he could cash in my life insurance and erase his debts. He was about to learn a lesson in structural engineering. If you attack the foundation, the whole house comes down on your head. I stepped into the alley, pulling my collar up. The hunt was on. But Tyson had made a fatal error. He thought he was the hunter. He was just the prey. The neon sign outside the motel window buzzed with a dying rhythmic hum that matched the pounding in my temples. I sat on the edge of the mattress, which smelled of stale cigarette smoke and cheap disinfectant. The wooden cradle sat on the chipped laminate table in front of me. It looked out of place in this room. It was a piece of art made from black walnut I had seasoned myself for 5 years. I had sanded every curve until it felt like silk under the fingertips. It was supposed to hold my grandson. Now it held a secret that could send me to federal prison for the rest of my life. I pulled the folding knife from my pocket. My hands were steady. They were the hands of a man who had welded steel beams at 40 stories high. They did not shake. I opened the blade and pressed the tip against the midnight blue velvet lining the bottom of the cradle. The fabric parted with a soft tearing sound. I reached into the hollow space I had designed for extra padding. My fingers brushed against cold plastic. I pulled it out. It was a heavy vacuum-sealed bag filled with white powder. Cocaine. High grade. Enough to warrant a mandatory minimum sentence that would see me die behind bars. I stared at the package and the room seemed to tilt. This was not just a prop for a stage play. This was a felony. My mind raced back to 4 hours ago. The drive to Tyson's house. I had stopped at a gas station on Wilshire, just 3 miles from their estate. I needed water. I had parked the truck and gone inside. When I came out, Victoria was there. She had parked her white Range Rover right next to my beat-up Ford. I remembered being surprised. She had smiled, that tight, predatory smile she saved for the help. "I didn't know you were stopping here, Langston," she had said. She was leaning into the open window of my truck. Her hand was inside the cab, resting on the cradle which I had buckled into the passenger seat. "I just wanted to see the craftsmanship," she had said, pulling her hand back as I approached. "It really is beautiful wood. Tyson will love it." It had seemed like an olive branch, a moment of genuine appreciation from a woman who usually looked at my work clothes with disdain. I had been a fool, an old sentimental fool. She wasn't admiring the wood, she was planting the evidence. She had slipped the package under the velvet lining while I was paying for a bottle of water. She knew I wouldn't check. She knew I would drive straight to their house with a felony riding shotgun. If I had been pulled over for a broken taillight, that would have been the end. They wouldn't have even needed the raid. They would have found Langston Jefferson, a black man in a beat-up truck with a brick of cocaine, and the system would have swallowed me whole. I looked at the bag again. I realized with a sickening jolt that my fingerprints were all over the cradle. I had built it, I had polished it, and now I had touched the bag to remove it. They had planned this down to the microsecond. This was not a crime of passion. This was an architectural blueprint for my destruction. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. I opened the bag and dumped the powder into the toilet. It took 3 flushes to get rid of it all. I washed the bag in the sink, scrubbing it with scalding water and soap until my skin burned, destroying any trace of DNA. Then I cut the plastic into tiny strips and flushed those too. I went back to the main room. I felt hollowed out. The betrayal was a physical weight in my gut. My son had not just set me up. He had weaponized my love for his unborn child against me. He knew I would bring a gift. He knew I would make something with my hands. He used my own craftsmanship as the vehicle for my demise. I needed noise. I needed to drown out the silence in my head. I picked up the remote and turned on the television bolted to the wall. The screen flickered to life. The local news channel was mid-broadcast. The banner at the bottom of the screen was bright red. Breaking news, manhunt for Beverly Hills drug kingpin. And there was my face. It was an old photo taken 10 years ago at a construction site. I was wearing a hard hat pointing at a blueprint looking stern. They had cropped the background out to make it look like a mugshot. "Police are searching for Langston Jefferson, 67, considered armed and dangerous," the anchor announced. Her voice was grave, practiced. "Authorities raided a luxury home in Beverly Hills tonight after a tip-off about a major drug transaction. The suspect, the father of prominent tech CEO Tyson Jefferson, fled the scene before SWAT teams arrived." The scene cut to a live feed from outside Tyson's house. Police lights washed the white stucco walls in blue and red. Tyson was standing next to a police captain. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my truck. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked like a broken child. I tried to help him. Tyson sobbed into the microphones thrust into his face. I knew he was involved in some bad things. I knew he needed money, but I never thought he would bring it into my house, into my pregnant wife's home. He paused, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. The cameras zoomed in. "He threatened us." Tyson continued, his voice trembling. "When we told him we wouldn't store his drugs, he pulled a gun. He put it to Victoria's head. He said he would kill us both and burn the house down if we went to the police. We barely escaped with our lives." I sat on the motel bed, unable to breathe. A gun. I had never owned a gun in my life. I carried a pocket knife for cutting twine and stripping wire. But Tyson was painting a picture of a monster. He wasn't just accusing me of possession, he was accusing me of assault with a deadly weapon, of terroristic threats of endangering his family. He threatened Victoria, Tyson repeated, looking directly into the camera lens. "Dad, if you are watching this, please, turn yourself in. Don't hurt anyone else. We forgive you. We just want you to get help." The anchor came back on screen. "Police warn that Jefferson has a history of violent outbursts and should not be approached." Lies. Layer upon layer of lies. They were burying me under a mountain of fabrication so deep I would never see the sun again. Violent outbursts. I was a man who measured twice and cut once. I was a man of discipline. But the world didn't know that. The world saw a wealthy, crying son and a fugitive father. The narrative was set. The concrete was pouring and I was being encased in it. I stared at Tyson's face on the screen. I looked for the boy I had raised. The boy I had taught to fish. The boy I had sat up with when he had fevers. He was gone. In his place was a stranger wearing my son's skin, reciting a script written by greed. But then the engineer in me took over. I stopped seeing a son. I stopped seeing a tragedy. I started seeing a structure. And every structure has stress points. Every structure has cracks if you look close enough. I moved closer to the television screen. The image was grainy, but it was high definition enough. I focused on Tyson. I ignored his tears. Tears are easy to manufacture. I looked at the details. He raised his hand to wipe his face again. I saw the watch on his wrist. It glinted under the news crew's floodlights. It was a Patek Philippe Nautilus with a blue dial. To the untrained eye, it was a status symbol worth over $100,000. It was the kind of watch a successful tech CEO would wear. But I wasn't an untrained eye. I knew metal. I knew precision. I looked at the way the light hit the bezel. The steel was too reflective. It lacked the subtle satin finish of genuine Swiss craftsmanship. The date window was slightly magnified, a common flaw in high-end replicas. And the way it sat on his wrist was wrong. It was too light. A real Nautilus has a specific heft, a gravitational pull. This was a fake, a super clone, made in a factory in Shenzhen, sold for $500 to men who wanted to look rich but were drowning in debt. Why would a CEO who just claimed to be closing a $10 million funding round wear a fake watch on national television because he didn't have the money for a real one? He didn't even have the money to lease a real one. I looked closer. I focused on his left hand, the hand wiping the tears. His pinky finger was rigid. It was taped up with flesh-colored medical tape blending into his skin, but I could see the stiffness. He couldn't bend it. It wasn't a splint from a sports injury. It was the specific, brutal break of a finger that has been snapped backward. I knew that injury. I had grown up in neighborhoods where loan sharks didn't send letters when you missed a payment. They sent a message. They broke the smallest finger on your non-dominant hand. It was painful enough to terrify you, but not debilitating enough to stop you from working to pay them back. It was a warning shot. The pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a hydraulic press. Tyson wasn't just living beyond his means. He was catastrophically broke. He was in debt to people who didn't file lawsuits. They broke fingers. And next, they would break legs. He needed money immediately. He needed a lump sum large enough to clear a debt that warranted physical torture. He didn't invite me over to reconcile. He didn't invite me over just to steal my savings. That was too slow. Probate courts take months. He needed the insurance payout, my life insurance policy. It was a relic from my days as the CEO of Atlas Holdings, a key man insurance policy I had transferred to myself when I retired. It was worth $5 million. And the beneficiary was Tyson. But insurance doesn't pay out for suicide. It doesn't pay out if I just disappear. However, if I died in a shootout with police while resisting arrest for drug trafficking, or if I died in prison, the money would flow. Or perhaps the plan wasn't for me to go to prison at all. Perhaps the gun he claimed I had was an excuse for the police to open fire the moment they saw me. They wanted me dead tonight. Tyson had staged this entire raid hoping I would panic, hoping I would run into the police line and get cut down, or hoping I would be arrested, discredited, and stripped of my assets so he could take power of attorney and liquidate everything I had to save his own skin. He was sacrificing his father to pay a gambling debt or a loan shark. I sat back on the bed. The rage that had been boiling in my chest turned into something colder, something harder. It turned into resolve. They thought they were dealing with a confused old man. They thought they were dealing with a retired mechanic who fixed trucks on weekends. They forgot that I was a structural engineer. I knew how to find the weak point in a foundation. Tyson's weak point was his vanity and his debt. He was bleeding money and he was terrified. Fear makes people stupid. Fear makes people careless. I reached for my burner phone. I wasn't going to run anymore. I was going to stabilize the structure and then I was going to bring it down on top of them. I dialed the number for the only man who could help me navigate this minefield. Jerome Banks. I needed to access the war chest. I needed to activate Atlas Holdings. It was time to remind my son who really owned the ground he stood on. The hunt wasn't over. It had just begun. And I was no longer the prey. I was the architect of his ruin. The morning sun hit the dirty pavement of the motel parking lot with a glare that felt like an interrogation light. I pulled my baseball cap lower and stepped out into the city that I had helped build but no longer recognized. My first priority was liquidity. A fugitive cannot fight a war on credit. I walked 3 blocks to a generic bank branch, keeping my head down, avoiding eye contact with the morning commuters. I found an ATM in the vestibule. I slid my debit card into the slot. It was the card for my personal checking account, the one I used for groceries and truck parts. It had a balance of $15,000, enough to get me out of the state if I decided to run. I punched in my PIN. The machine whirred. It made a mechanical clunking sound that echoed in the small glass room. The screen flickered. A red message appeared. Card retained. Contact issuer immediately. I stared at the screen. I pressed the cancel button. I pressed it again. The machine remained silent. It had swallowed my lifeline. I stepped back, the realization hitting me like a physical blow to the chest. Tyson had moved faster than I anticipated. He had not just gone to the police. He had likely gone to a judge with an emergency motion claiming that the suspected drug money in my accounts needed to be frozen under civil forfeiture laws. Or perhaps he had argued that I was mentally unstable and a flight risk. I checked my phone banking app on my personal cell. Access denied. Account locked. I was 67 years old. I had built skyscrapers. I had a net worth that would make the bank manager weep. But in that moment, I was effectively homeless. I had $2,000 in crumpled bills in my wallet and the clothes on my back. I was a ghost in my own city. I did not panic. Panic is for people who do not understand how systems work. I understood that a frozen account is just a locked door, and I knew how to pick locks. But I could not use my personal phone anymore. It was a tracking beacon. I walked to a bodega on the corner. I bought a prepaid phone and a SIM card with cash. I bought a bottle of water and a protein bar. I threw my old smartphone into a passing garbage truck. I watched it disappear into the compactor. That life was gone. I sat on a park bench and activated the burner phone. My hands were steady. The anger that had been a roaring fire the night before had cooled into a block of ice in my gut. I had to make a call. I dialed a number I had memorized 20 years ago. It was a direct line that bypassed secretaries and screening services. Jerome Banks answered on the second ring. Langston, his voice was deep calm and sounded like gravel grinding together. I was wondering when you would call. I saw the morning news. They have your face on every channel. They say you are the Pablo Escobar of Beverly Hills. I need an extraction, Jerome, I said, watching a police cruiser roll slowly past the park. I am at the corner of 5th and Main. I have $2,000 and a story that will burn this city down. Give me 10 minutes, Jerome said. Look for the black Suburban. Do not move. Jerome Banks was not just a lawyer. He was a force of nature. We had grown up on the same block. We had fought the same fights. While I went into engineering, he went into law. He defended the indefensible because he knew the system was rigged. He was the only man alive who knew the full extent of my history. 10 minutes later, a black armored SUV pulled up to the curb. The back door opened. I climbed inside. The interior smelled of expensive leather and old cigars. Jerome was sitting there wearing a suit that cost more than my first house. He looked at me at my flannel shirt and work boots, and he did not smile. He handed me a glass of bourbon. You look like hell, Langston, he said. I feel like it, I replied, taking the drink. My son set me up, Jerome. He planted cocaine in a cradle I made for his child. He called the SWAT team on me. Jerome nodded slowly. The driver took us onto the highway, heading away from the city center towards the industrial district where Jerome kept his secure offices. I know, Jerome said. I have already made some calls. The warrant is for possession with intent to distribute. It is a mandatory minimum of 20 years. Tyson gave a statement this morning. He played the grieving son perfectly. He said he tried to get you into rehab. He said you threatened his wife. The whiskey burned my throat. It is a lie, I said. All of it. He is broke, Jerome. He is drowning in debt. He needed me out of the way to get the insurance money or power of attorney. We arrived at Jerome's office. It was a fortress disguised as a warehouse. We went into his private conference room, a soundproof bunker with no windows. I sat at the mahogany table. Jerome sat opposite me. We have a problem, Langston, Jerome said, opening a file. The courts have frozen your personal assets pending the investigation. Tyson is already moving to file for emergency guardianship. He claims your criminal behavior is a sign of dementia. He wants control of the estate. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Let him file, I said. Let him try to take control of my pension. Let him try to sell my truck. Jerome frowned. Langston, this is serious. If he gets guardianship, he gets everything. No, Jerome, I said, leaning forward. He gets what he thinks I have. He gets the retirement accounts. He gets the house in the suburbs. He gets the crumbs. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, battered notebook. I slid it across the table to Jerome. Tyson thinks I am a retired engineer, I said. He thinks I made a good living and saved well. He does not know about the rest. Jerome opened the notebook. His eyes scanned the pages. He stopped. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. Atlas Holdings, Jerome whispered. I nodded. You own Atlas Holdings, Jerome asked, his voice losing its professional composure. The venture capital firm, the one that funds half the startups in Silicon Valley. I am the silent partner, I said. I own 51% of the voting stock through a shell company in the Caymans. I retired from public life, but I never retired from the money. I kept it quiet because I wanted Tyson to build his own way. I wanted him to be hungry. Jerome looked back at the notebook. Tyson's company, he said. Nexus Tech. They just announced a funding round. They are celebrating a $10 million injection from Atlas Holdings. I finished the sentence. Tyson was waiting for a check from me. He didn't know it was from me. He thought it was from a faceless board of directors. He was celebrating his salvation while he was framing his savior. I leaned back in the chair. Tyson just tried to kill the man who signs his paychecks, Jerome. He thinks he is playing chess. He does not realize he is just a pawn on my board. Jerome closed the notebook. A slow smile spread across his face. So, Jerome said, we are not just fighting a criminal defense case. We are fighting a corporate takeover. No, I said, we are not taking over. We are pulling the plug. I want to draft a document, Jerome. I want to execute the morality clause in the investment contract. I want to recall the loans. I want to freeze his company's assets. I want to bankrupt him before lunch. Jerome laughed. He poured himself a drink. I love it when you get angry, Langston. My burner phone buzzed on the table. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I looked at the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. I picked it up. There was an audio file attached. No text, just the file. I pressed play. The sound was grainy, recorded from a distance, perhaps from a phone hidden in a pocket or a camera mounted high on a wall. There was the clatter of dishes. Then a voice cut through the static. It was Victoria. I can't believe he actually ran, she was saying. Her voice was high manic. I thought for sure the cops would shoot him in the yard. Then Tyson's voice. He is fast for an old man, but it doesn't matter. He is a fugitive now. He can't access his money. We just have to wait. Wait for what? Victoria snapped. We don't have time to wait, Tyson. Vargas wants his money by Friday. $5 million. If we don't pay, he is going to start cutting off pieces of us. We will sell his house, Tyson said. I will get the emergency guardianship tomorrow. We can liquidate his portfolio. That should cover the interest, at least. And the insurance, Victoria asked. If he gets caught and goes to prison, we can argue he is incompetent and take the policy, Tyson said. Or if he dies on the run, well, that solves everything. The audio ended. I looked at Jerome. The room felt very cold. Vargas, Jerome said, that is not a bank, Langston. That is the cartel. I nodded. My son wasn't just broke. He was in debt to butchers. He owed $5 million to people who dissolved bodies in acid. That explained the desperation. That explained the broken finger I had seen on the news. That explained why he was willing to send his own father to prison or the grave. He was terrified. But fear does not excuse patricide. Rosa sent this, I said, recognizing the background noise of the kitchen. She is the maid who warned me. She must have recorded this after the raid. She is brave, Jerome said, and she just gave us the smoking gun. I stood up and walked to the wall where Jerome had a map of the city. I traced the route from Tyson's mansion to the financial district. Tyson is throwing a party today, I said. He is announcing the Atlas funding. He thinks he is safe. He thinks I am running scared in the woods. I turned back to Jerome. Draft the letter, Jerome. Send it to his office by fax. Let's remind my son that actions have consequences. Jerome cracked his knuckles. With pleasure. I looked at the phone again. Rosa had risked her life to send that. Victoria and Tyson were talking about killing me like it was a business transaction. They were talking about selling my home to pay off a drug lord. They wanted my money to save their lives. I was going to make sure they didn't get a single dime. I was going to strip them bare. I was going to leave them to face Vargas alone. The war had moved from the streets to the boardroom, and I had never lost a boardroom brawl in 40 years. I sat in the leather chair of Jerome Banks's private war room, my eyes fixed on the bank of monitors covering the far wall. The air conditioning hummed a low artificial sound that did little to cool the heat radiating from the screens. We were tapped into the internal security feed of Nexus Tech. I had installed the system myself 5 years ago when I secretly funded the startup. I knew every blind spot and every microphone location. Tyson thought he was the master of his domain, but he was just a tenant in a building I owned. On the center screen, my son stood on a makeshift stage in the middle of the open-plan office. He was wearing a navy suit that fit him perfectly, likely tailored on Savile Row and paid for with the money he had siphoned from my retirement accounts. He held a flute of champagne, the bubbles catching the light of the overhead LEDs. He looked confident. He looked successful. He looked like a man who hadn't just framed his father for a felony 3 hours ago. Around him stood his employees and a handful of nervous shareholders. They were drinking his liquor and eating his catered food, desperate for reassurance. The news of the raid on Tyson's home had spooked the market. They needed a savior. I watched Tyson raise his hand for silence. He smiled, that charming, practiced smile that used to make me proud. Now it just made me check for my wallet. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Tyson said, his voice smooth and projecting confidence. "I know the news today has been disturbing. The situation with my father is a personal tragedy. We tried to get him help for his addiction, but he refused." I gripped the armrest of the chair. Addiction. I had never touched a drug in my life. I barely drank, but he was weaving the narrative, painting me as a chaotic junkie to explain away the cocaine he had planted. However, Tyson continued, his voice dropping to a somber, serious register. "Business must go on. I just got off the phone with the board at Atlas Holdings. They understand that this is a family matter separate from the company. They have assured me of their unwavering support. In fact, to show their confidence in our vision, Atlas has committed an additional $10 million in liquidity to ensure we hit our quarterly targets." Applause broke out in the room. Relief washed over the faces of the shareholders. They toasted him. They clapped him on the back. Tyson beamed, drinking it in. He believed his own lie. He thought Atlas Holdings was some distant, faceless conglomerate in Switzerland or the Caymans. He thought he could charm them over the phone. He didn't know that the chairman of the board was sitting 5 miles away in a dark room wearing work boots and a flannel shirt, watching him dig his own grave. I turned to Jerome. He was sitting at the control desk, his fingers hovering over a laptop. "Do it," I said. Jerome didn't smile. This wasn't a game to him either. It was an execution. He hit the enter key. We didn't send an email. Emails can be ignored. Emails can be deleted. We sent a fax. In the corner of the Nexus Tech office, behind the cheering crowd, the old heavy-duty fax machine woke up. It let out a shrill electronic screech that cut through the applause like a knife. It was a sound from the past, insistent and demanding. Paper began to churn out. Tyson ignored it at first. He was busy shaking hands, playing the role of the benevolent leader. But his assistant, a young woman named Sarah, moved toward the machine. She pulled the pages from the tray. I watched on the high-definition feed as her eyes scanned the document. Her face went pale. She looked up at Tyson, her hands trembling. She walked through the crowd, ignoring the celebration. She tapped Tyson on the shoulder. He turned annoyed at the interruption. She whispered something to him and handed him the papers. Tyson frowned. He took a sip of champagne and looked down at the document. I knew exactly what it said. I had dictated it 10 minutes ago. It was a formal notice of default. The document cited the Morality Clause, Section 4, Paragraph B of the investment agreement. It stated that any executive officer involved in a federal investigation, public scandal, or criminal association that damaged the reputation of the company was in breach of contract. Tyson had just gone on national television and admitted that his home, a home purchased with company-backed loans, was the site of a federal drug raid. He had admitted to associating with a known drug trafficker, even if that trafficker was his father. He had triggered the clause himself. I watched Tyson's eyes widen. The glass of champagne slipped from his fingers. It shattered on the polished concrete floor, the sound echoing in the sudden silence of the room. The fax didn't just cancel the $10 million. It demanded the immediate repayment of the previous $2 million bridge loan. The terms were non-negotiable. Full payment was due within 24 hours. If payment was not received, Atlas Holdings would exercise its right to seize all collateral. The collateral listed was specific. It included the intellectual property of Nexus Tech. It included Tyson's majority shares. And because Tyson had been arrogant enough to sign a personal guarantee believing he would never fail it, included his personal real estate. The mansion. The same mansion where he had just staged my destruction. Tyson read the page again. He looked around the room wild-eyed. He looked like a man who had just realized the parachute he packed was full of silverware. "Excuse me," Tyson stammered. "I need to take this." He ran toward his private office, slamming the glass door behind him. The party outside died instantly. The shareholders began to whisper. Sarah, the assistant, looked at the fax machine as if it were a bomb that had just gone off. I signaled Jerome to switch the audio feed to Tyson's office. We had a microphone in the ceiling vent. Tyson was pacing the small room, hyperventilating. He ripped his tie loose. He grabbed his phone and dialed with shaking fingers. He put it on speaker and threw it on the desk. "Pick up, pick up, pick up," Tyson hissed, running his hands through his hair. The line clicked. "What is it?" Victoria's voice filled the room. She sounded annoyed, not scared. "Did you get the money?" Tyson let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. No, I didn't get the money." Atlas pulled the plug. "What?" Victoria snapped. "What do you mean they pulled the plug?" "You said it was a done deal. They sent a fax." Victoria Tyson screamed at the phone. "A fax. They cited the morality clause. They saw the news. They know about the raid. They want their $2 million back in 24 hours, or they are taking everything. The company, the house, everything." There was a silence on the line. I leaned forward, watching my son unravel. He was sweating profusely now. The fake Patek Philippe watch weighed heavy on his wrist. $2 million, Tyson moaned. "I don't have it. I don't even have 200,000. Vargas is going to kill me. He is going to cut me into pieces and feed me to the pigs." "Shut up." Victoria's voice was sharp, cutting through his panic. "Stop crying and think. You are pathetic when you panic. I can't think." Tyson yelled. "I am a dead man. We are dead. We are not dead," Victoria said, her voice dropping to a cold, calculating register that I recognized from the night she planted the drugs. "We just need liquidity. We need assets we can sell fast." "We don't have assets," Tyson shouted. "The house is leveraged to the hilt. The cars are leased." "Your father has assets," Victoria said. Tyson stopped pacing. He stared at the phone. "My father is a fugitive. His accounts are frozen. We can't touch them. We can't touch the bank accounts," Victoria agreed. "But we can touch the physical assets. The house. His house." I stiffened in my chair. My house. The modest 3-bedroom craftsman I had lived in for 40 years. The house where I had raised Tyson. The house I had built with my own hands before I made my fortune. It was paid off. It was in a gentrified neighborhood. It was worth nearly $1 million. "He isn't there," Tyson said slowly. "He is on the run." "Exactly," Victoria said. "He can't come back to stop us. And you have his power of attorney." "No, I don't," Tyson said. "He never signed it. He refused." Victoria laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. "Tyson, you idiot. I forged it 3 months ago. I have the document right here. It is notarized and backdated. It gives you full control over his real estate in the event of his absence or incapacity. Being a wanted fugitive counts as absence." I looked at Jerome. His jaw was set hard. Forgery. Fraud. They were adding to the list of crimes by the second. "We can sell it to that investor," Victoria continued, her voice speeding up with excitement. "The one who buys properties for cash, no questions asked. The guy who flips them. We can get 600,000 or 700,000 by tomorrow morning if we drop the price. It won't pay off Atlas, but it will pay off Vargas enough to buy us time." "Sell my father's house?" Tyson asked. "He is dead anyway, Tyson," Victoria said. "Either the cops shoot him or he goes to prison for 20 years. He doesn't need a house. We need to survive. Meet me there in an hour. Bring a locksmith. We need to get into his safe to get the deed." The line went dead. Tyson stood there for a moment, breathing hard. Then a look of resolve settled over his face. It wasn't the resolve of a brave man. It was the resolve of a rat cornered in an alley. He wiped his face, straightened his jacket, and walked out of the office. I watched him leave. I watched him walk past his confused employees and out the front door. I turned to Jerome. "My house," I said. Jerome nodded. "They are going to break in. They are going to try to sell it out from under you." I stood up. I buttoned my flannel shirt. I checked the pocket knife in my pocket. "Let them try," I said. My house wasn't just a building, it was a vault. I had built it to withstand earthquakes, fires, and storms. And I had updated the security system 6 months ago when I first started suspecting Tyson was stealing from me. They thought they were breaking into an old man's home. They didn't know they were walking into a fortress designed by a paranoid structural engineer. They want the deed, I said, walking toward the door. I will give them something better. I will give them a lesson in security. I looked back at the screen one last time. The party at Nexus Tech was officially over. The champagne was warm, the guests were leaving, but the real party was about to start at 42 Elm Street. Get the car, Jerome, I said. We have a housewarming to attend. Jerome and I watched the high-definition monitors in silence. The feed came from 4 concealed cameras mounted around the perimeter of my home on Elm Street. It was 3 in the morning. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that usually meant safety in a neighborhood like this. But tonight, it provided cover for the thieves. A black sedan rolled up the driveway with its headlights off. It wasn't Tyson's car, and it certainly wasn't Victoria's Range Rover. It was a rental. They were trying to be discreet, but desperation makes people sloppy. The car stopped. 3 figures stepped out into the moonlight. I recognized Tyson immediately by the slump of his shoulders. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. Victoria was next, moving with a sharp, agitated energy. She was checking her phone, likely looking for updates from Vargas or checking flight times. The third man was short, carrying a heavy tool bag. A locksmith, or rather, a safecracker they had pulled from the yellow pages of the criminal underworld. They walked up the porch steps. I felt a phantom ache in my chest, seeing them approach the door I had hung myself 40 years ago. I had sanded that oak. I had stained it. I had installed the deadbolt to keep my family safe. Now my family was breaking it down. The locksmith knelt. He worked quickly. I had installed a high-security lock, but a professional with a pick gun can bypass almost anything if they have enough time. It took him 2 minutes. The lock clicked. The door swung inward. They stepped into the foyer. I switched the camera view to the interior feeds. The house was dark, illuminated only by the thin beams of their flashlights. They moved like ghosts through the living room. Tyson paused by the fireplace. He shone his light on the mantel where pictures of him stood. Graduation photos, baseball team photos. He lingered for a second, his hand reaching out to touch a framed image of us fishing at Big Bear Lake. "Move it, Tyson," Victoria hissed. Her voice was picked up clearly by the microphone in the smart thermostat. "We are not here for a stroll down memory lane. We are here for the deed." Tyson flinched as if she had struck him. He dropped his hand and followed her toward the study. I had built the study as my sanctuary. It was where I drafted blueprints. It was where I read books on physics and architecture. And it was where I kept the floor safe. They entered the room. Victoria swept her flashlight around until it landed on the Persian rug in the corner. "There," she said, pointing. "Move the rug." Tyson dragged the heavy carpet aside. Beneath it was a panel in the floorboards. I had shown Tyson this secret spot when he was 10 years old. I had told him it was where we kept the pirate treasure. He used to hide his comic books in there. Now he was using that childhood trust to rob me. He pried the panel up. The steel face of the safe glinted in the flashlight beam. It was a reinforced model, fireproof and drill-resistant, or so the manufacturer claimed. "Open it," Victoria commanded the locksmith. The man knelt down. He pulled a stethoscope and a high-speed diamond-tipped drill from his bag. "I can't manipulate this one," he muttered. "It is electronic with a mechanical backup. I have to drill the tumblers. It is going to be loud." "Just do it," Victoria snapped. "We don't have time." The drill whined to life. The sound was a high-pitched shriek that tore through the silence of the house. I watched on the monitor, my face impassive. Jerome poured me another drink, but I didn't touch it. I needed to be sharp. I needed to savor this. It took 10 minutes of drilling. Metal shavings curled onto the wooden floor I had refinished last summer. Finally, there was a heavy clunk. The locking mechanism disengaged. "Got it," the locksmith said, wiping sweat from his forehead. He pulled the heavy steel door open. Victoria shoved him aside. She dropped to her knees, her hands greedy and shaking. She shone the light inside the dark cavity of the safe. She was expecting to find the deed to the house. She was expecting to find stock certificates, bonds, maybe stacks of cash I kept for emergencies. She was expecting salvation. She froze. "What is it?" Tyson asked, leaning over her shoulder. "Do you have it?" Victoria didn't answer. She reached into the safe and pulled out the only object resting on the metal shelf. It wasn't a document. It was a photograph. It was an old Polaroid, slightly faded with age. It showed me standing in the framing of this very house 40 years ago. I was young, covered in sawdust, smiling with the exhaustion that only a new father knows. In my arms I was holding a baby, Tyson. He was asleep against my chest. Victoria stared at the photo. She flipped it over. There was writing on the back. I had written it 2 hours ago before I left with Jerome. "Read it," Tyson whispered. Victoria's voice trembled with rage as she read the words aloud. "I built a foundation for your life with concrete and steel, but you chose to build your castle on sand. Now watch it collapse, son." Tyson snatched the photo from her hand. He stared at my handwriting. The realization hit him. The safe wasn't empty because I had moved the things years ago. It was empty because I had been here tonight. I knew they were coming. "He isn't on the run," Tyson breathed, looking around the dark room with wide, terrified eyes. He knows everything." Victoria stood up screaming, "Where is the deed? Where is the money? We need that money. We have to go," Tyson said, backing away. "This is a trap. Victoria, we have to leave right now." But it was too late. I reached out and pressed the enter key on the laptop in front of me. The command traveled through the encrypted network, bounced off a satellite, and hit the central server of my smart home system. The reaction was instantaneous. Heavy steel shutters designed to withstand hurricane-force winds slammed down over every window in the house simultaneously. The sound was like a thunderclap, a deafening boom that shook the walls. Clang, clang, clang. Total darkness fell over the house as the shutters blocked out the moonlight and the street lamps. The front door, which they had left slightly ajar, slammed shut with a hydraulic hiss. The magnetic locks engaged with a snap that sounded like a bone breaking. They were sealed in. Inside the study, chaos erupted. The locksmith shouted and ran for the hallway. Tyson dropped the photo. Victoria spun around, aiming her flashlight at the windows, but all she saw was corrugated steel. "What is happening?" Victoria shrieked. "Open the door! Open it!" The locksmith was banging on the front door. "It is maglocked," he yelled. "It won't budge. It is like a bank vault." I leaned into the microphone on Jerome's desk. I pressed the talk button. My voice was amplified through the high-fidelity speakers I had installed in every room of the house. "Welcome home, children." They froze. The sound of my voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, filling the house like God speaking from a burning bush. Dad, Tyson whimpered. He looked up at the ceiling, spinning in circles. "Dad, please, let us out." I ignored his plea. I kept my voice calm, the voice of a man reading a eulogy. "You broke into my home," I said. "You brought a stranger to drill into my safe. You came to sell the roof over my head to pay for your sins." "It wasn't me," Tyson shouted, sobbing now. "It was her. It was Victoria. She made me do it." Victoria turned on him. Her face twisted in the flashlight beam. "You coward. You spineless little worm. Don't you dare blame me." I watched them turn on each other. It was inevitable. Rats always eat each other when the ship goes down. I checked the time. "The police have been notified," I announced. "The silent alarm was tripped the moment you touched the safe." "They are 3 minutes out." "This is not a friendly visit, Tyson. This is a burglary in progress. This is breaking and entering, and since you have a locksmith with drilling tools, it is possession of burglary instruments." Tyson fell to his knees. No. I can't go to jail. Vargas will find me inside. He will kill me." "You should have thought of that before you tried to frame me for cocaine trafficking," I said. "You should have thought of that before you tried to bury your father." Victoria ran to the window in the living room. She picked up a heavy crystal vase and smashed it against the steel shutter. The vase shattered into dust. The shutter didn't even dent. "Let us out, Langston," she screamed. "We will sue you. We will tell them you kidnapped us." I laughed. It was a cold sound that echoed through the empty house. "Kidnapped. You broke in. I have the video footage. I have the audio. I have you ordering the locksmith to drill the safe. I have you reading the note. You are done, Victoria." Tyson was crawling on the floor now. He found the photo he had dropped. He clutched it to his chest. He was rocking back and forth. "I am sorry, Dad. I am sorry. I just wanted to be like you. I just wanted to be successful. You didn't want to be like me, son." I said, my voice softening, just a fraction tinged with a grief I couldn't hide. "I built things. You only know how to destroy. You wanted the reward without the work, and now you have earned the penalty." Sirens began to wail in the distance. They were getting louder. "You have 2 minutes," I said. "I suggest you lie down on the floor with your hands behind your heads. The officers who are coming respond poorly to surprises." And Tyson. He looked up at the ceiling, tears streaming down his face. "Yes. Dad. Happy housewarming." I cut the audio feed. I watched on the monitor as the red and blue lights of the police cruisers washed over the front lawn. I saw the officers approach with guns drawn. They banged on the door. "Open up, police." I waited a moment, then remotely disengaged the magnetic locks on the front door. The police kicked it open. They swarmed into the hallway. I saw them find Tyson first. He was curled in a fetal position in the center of the living room rug, clutching the photo of us. He didn't resist. He let them cuff him. He looked broken, a shell of a man who had finally collapsed under the weight of his own lies. They found Victoria in the kitchen. She was trying to hide behind the island. She fought. She scratched an officer's face before they pinned her down. She was screaming obscenities, blaming everyone but herself. The locksmith gave up immediately, dropping his tools and raising his hands. I watched as they were dragged out of the house. Tyson was led down the walkway where he had learned to ride a tricycle. He was shoved into the back of a squad car. He looked back at the house one last time. The shutters were still down. The house was a closed fist. I turned off the monitor. The screen went black. Jerome sat in the silence for a moment. He swirled the bourbon in his glass. "That was biblical, Langston," he said quietly. "It was necessary," I replied. I stood up. My legs felt heavy. I suddenly felt every one of my 67 years. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion. "Is it over?" Jerome asked. "No," I said. "This was just the arrest. Now comes the demolition. Tyson is going to call me. He is going to beg for bail. He is going to think that because he is my son, I will save him from the consequences." I walked to the door of the war room. He needs to understand that I am not his savior anymore. I am the plaintiff. I opened the door and looked back at Jerome. "Prepare the civil suits, Jerome. I want to sue him for the value of the cradle he ruined. I want to sue him for emotional distress. I want to sue him for the cost of the locksmith repairs. I want to sue him for everything he has." Jerome nodded. "And Victoria, I want her investigated," I said. "If she forged a power of attorney, she has done it before. Dig into her past. Find every skeleton. I want her to stay in prison until she is old and gray." I stepped out into the hallway. The night was over. Dawn was breaking over the city. I had my freedom. I had my money. But I had lost my son. The victory tasted like ash. But as I walked toward the elevator, I knew I would do it again. Because a man who cannot protect his own house has no business building them for others. I was Langston Jefferson, and I was still standing. I watched the monitors in the war room with a sense of grim satisfaction that quickly turned to ice in my veins. The police had Tyson and Victoria pinned to the floor. The locksmith was already in cuffs. It should have been the end. It should have been the moment the steel doors of a cell slammed shut on my son and his wife. But then I saw Victoria move. She wasn't struggling. She was reaching into her blouse. She pulled out a hidden phone that the officers hadn't secured yet. She screamed a name. Miller. Sheriff Miller. I knew the name. He was the local law in the county jurisdiction that bordered the city. He was a man with a smile like a shark and pockets deep enough to hide a battleship. I had heard rumors about him for years. Rumors about payoffs. Rumors about evidence disappearing from lockers. I didn't know he was Victoria's ace in the hole. I watched as the sergeant on the scene touched his earpiece. His face went pale. He held up a hand signaling his men to stop. He listened for 10 seconds. Then he nodded. "Stand down," the sergeant barked. The officers looked confused. One of them still had his knee on Tyson's back. I said, "Stand down." The sergeant repeated, his voice tight with frustration. "We have new orders from the sheriff. This is not a burglary. This is a domestic dispute involving hostages. Hostages." My jaw tightened until my teeth ached. Victoria had spun the narrative in real time. She had called her lover the sheriff, and he had overruled the city police on a jurisdictional technicality or a favor called into the captain. The officers stepped back. They uncuffed Tyson. They helped Victoria to her feet. She didn't look like a criminal anymore. She looked like a survivor. She smoothed her dress and pointed at the camera in the corner of the ceiling. She knew I was watching. She smiled. It wasn't a smile of relief. It was a declaration of war. They walked out of my house, not in squad cars. in an unmarked sedan that pulled up to the curb moments later. Sheriff Miller himself was driving. I saw his profile through the tinted glass. He looked at my house, then at the camera I had hidden in the oak tree. He winked. Tyson got into the back seat. He looked shaken, pale, and sweaty, but he was free. Victoria slid into the front seat next to the sheriff. She placed her hand on his arm. It was a gesture of intimacy that told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just paying him. She was sleeping with him. I slammed my fist onto the desk. The coffee mug jumped. "They got away," Jerome said quietly. He was staring at the screen, his face unreadable. "That is Sheriff Miller. If he is involved, this goes deeper than we thought. He runs this county like a fiefdom. They didn't just get away," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "They just escalated the timeline. If they have the sheriff, they don't need to break in anymore. They can use the law to kick down the door." The sedan drove away, disappearing into the night. My house stood empty again. The shutters were still down. The door was broken. But the violation felt deeper now. They had turned the justice system into their personal getaway car. I turned away from the screens. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. I had tried to use the rules. I had tried to use the courts and the police, but you cannot play by the rules when your opponent owns the referee. I looked at Jerome. "Get ready," I said. "They are going to come for me in the morning. And they aren't going to use burglary tools next time. They are going to use the media." I was right. The sun had barely risen over the city skyline when the first broadcast hit the airwaves. We were in the safe house, a secure penthouse apartment Jerome kept under a shell corporation. I was drinking black coffee that tasted like battery acid. Jerome turned on the large television on the wall. It was a morning talk show. The host, a woman known for her sympathetic interviews and soft lighting, was leaning forward with a look of practiced concern. "Joining us now is Victoria Jefferson and her husband, tech CEO Tyson Jefferson," she said. "They have a harrowing story to tell. A story of abuse, fear, and a family held hostage by a man the world thought was a hero." The camera panned to the sofa. Victoria was dressed in white. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled back loosely. She looked fragile. She looked like an angel who had been dragged through hell. Beside her, Tyson sat with his head in his hands. He had a bandage on his forehead, likely a prop, or maybe he had hit himself during his tantrum in my living room. "Victoria," the host said softly, "tell us what happened last night." Victoria took a shaky breath. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue. "We went to his house to try and talk some sense into him," she began, her voice trembling perfectly. "We were worried. After the drug raid, after he ran, we thought he might be suicidal. We just wanted to help. But when we got there—" She paused, looking at Tyson. He nodded, playing the role of the traumatized victim. "He trapped us," Victoria whispered. "He has turned that house into a fortress. Steel shutters, magnetic locks. He locked us in the dark. And then his voice came over the speakers. "What did he say?" the host asked, horrified. "He said he was going to kill us." Victoria lied. She looked directly into the camera. She was looking at the audience, but I knew she was speaking to me. "He said he has been planning this for years. He said he hates Tyson. He has always hated him." "Why?" the host asked. "Why would a father hate his own son?" "Because he is sick," Victoria said. She leaned forward, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Langston Jefferson is a violent, paranoid schizophrenic. He has been hiding it for decades. He beat Tyson when he was a child. He locked him in closets. He broke his arm when he was 10 because he spilled milk." I stood up, knocking my chair over. It was a lie so vile, so absolute that it took the air out of the room. I had never laid a hand on Tyson in anger. I had treated him like a prince. I had bandaged his knees. I had taught him to catch a baseball. The broken arm she mentioned happened when he fell out of a treehouse I built for him. I had carried him to the hospital in my arms, running red lights, terrified he was hurt, and now they were twisting my love into abuse. Tyson looked up. There were real tears in his eyes now, tears of shame or perhaps fear of what he was doing. "It is true," Tyson choked out. "I tried to protect his reputation. I tried to be a good son. But I can't do it anymore. He is dangerous. He needs to be in a facility where he can't hurt anyone else." The host looked shocked. "And you have proof of this history?" "We do," Victoria said. She gestured to the side of the stage. A man walked out. He was old, stooped, wearing a tattered cardigan. I didn't recognize him at first. Then I realized who it was. It was Mr. Henderson, a neighbor who had lived down the street 20 years ago. He had been a drunk then. Apparently he still was. I saw it. Henderson croaked, sitting down. I heard the boy screaming. Langston was a mean drunk. He terrorized that boy. They had paid him. They had found a desperate man and bought his integrity for the price of a bottle. This changes everything, the host said, turning to the camera. We are hearing reports that the family is filing for emergency guardianship to force Langston Jefferson into psychiatric care and freeze his assets to prevent him from funding his flight from justice. I turned off the TV. The silence in the penthouse was heavy. They aren't just trying to steal my money, I said, my voice calm but vibrating with rage. They are trying to erase my history. They are trying to turn me into a monster so no one will look for the truth when I disappear. Jerome was on his phone. He was pacing the room. He hung up and looked at me. His face was gray. It is working, Langston, Jerome said. What do you mean, I asked. I just got off the phone with the courthouse, Jerome said. The judge saw the broadcast. The public outcry is massive. The hashtag Justice for Tyson is trending. The district attorney is under pressure to act fast. So fight it, I said. We have the truth. We have the truth, but we don't have time, Jerome said. He walked over to the table and slammed his hand down on a file. The judge is granting an emergency injunction. They are filing a temporary restraining order on your assets based on the probable cause that they are proceeds of criminal activity or being used to facilitate a flight from justice. Which assets, I asked. My personal accounts. Everything, Jerome said. He looked me in the eye. They are freezing. Atlas Holdings Langston. I froze. Atlas Holdings was my shield and my sword. It was the source of my power. It was the leverage I had over Tyson's company. They can't do that, I said. Atlas is a separate entity. They are arguing that Atlas is the shell company you use to launder drug money, Jerome explained. The sheriff provided a statement saying they found financial documents in your house linking you to cartels. It is a fabrication, but it is enough for a temporary freeze. How long, I asked. 48 hours, Jerome said. The judge signed a 48-hour hold to review the evidence. If we don't produce irrefutable proof of your innocence and their conspiracy within 2 days, the guardianship goes through. Tyson becomes the trustee of your estate. He gets control of Atlas. He gets control of your house. He gets control of you. I walked to the window. I looked down at the city. It looked different now. It looked like a battlefield. If Tyson gets control of Atlas, I said, he will drain the accounts to pay Vargas. He will bankrupt the fund. He will destroy 40 years of work in an afternoon. Yes, Jerome said, and he will put you in a state-run facility where the doctors are paid to keep you sedated until you die of natural causes. 48 hours. 2 days to dismantle a conspiracy involving the police, the media, and my own family. 2 days before I ceased to be a person and became a ward of the state. I turned back to Jerome. They want a monster, I said. I will give them a monster. But I am not going to hide in the dark anymore. What are you going to do? Jerome asked. I'm going to save the damsel in distress, I said. Jerome looked confused. Who, Rosa? I said. The maid. She is the only honest person in that house, and right now she is the loose end they are going to cut. If they are willing to frame me, what do you think they will do to an immigrant woman who knows the truth? I grabbed my jacket. They are using the media to bury me. I am going to use the truth to dig my way out, but first, I need my witness, and I need to get her before the sheriff does. I checked the time. The clock starts now, Jerome. Get the car. We are going hunting. The vibration of my burner phone on the mahogany table was the only sound in the war room aside from the low hum of the servers. I picked it up expecting bad news, but what I saw made the blood freeze in my veins. It was a single text message from Rosa. They know. ICE is coming. Help me. I looked at Jerome. He was already typing furiously on his laptop, tapping into the local police dispatch frequencies. His face went ashen as he looked up at me. Victoria found the leak, Jerome said, his voice tight. She checked the dash cam footage from the car Rosa uses for grocery runs. She heard Rosa recording that audio message for you. I stood up, grabbing the keys to the armored SUV from the desk. What did she do? I asked, already moving toward the door. She fired her, Jerome said, reading the scrolling text on his screen. But she didn't just fire her. She called the sheriff, and she called immigration and customs enforcement. She told them Rosa stole jewelry and is in the country illegally. They are not sending a patrol car, Langston. They are sending a deportation van. They are going to make her disappear before she can testify. I didn't wait to hear any more. Rosa was the only reason I wasn't sitting in a federal holding cell right now. She had risked her livelihood and her freedom to save me, and now my family was using her as a disposable pawn to cover their tracks. I knew exactly where Rosa lived. It was a small apartment complex in East Los Angeles, a place where people kept their heads down and tried to survive. If the authorities got to her first, she would be in a detention center by sunset and on a plane by morning. My witness would be gone, and an innocent woman would be destroyed. I took the elevator down to the garage 3 floors at a time. I jumped into the driver's seat of the black armored Suburban. It was a beast of a vehicle reinforced with ballistic steel and bulletproof glass designed for war zones, not city streets. But today, Los Angeles was a war zone. I fired the engine. It roared to life with the sound of pure, unadulterated power. I tore out of the garage tires, screeching against the concrete. I didn't care about traffic laws. I didn't care about being seen. I had a 20-minute head start if I was lucky. I drove with the precision of a man who sees physics in every turn. I weaved through the mid-morning traffic, mounting curbs and running red lights. The GPS on the dashboard counted down the minutes. 12 minutes. 10 minutes. I turned onto Rosa's street. It was narrow-lined with parked cars and palm trees that hadn't been trimmed in years. I saw her. She was standing on the sidewalk, clutching a plastic bag full of clothes. She was shaking, looking left and right, terror etched into every line of her face. She wasn't running because she had nowhere to go. She was waiting for the end. And then I saw them. At the other end of the block, 2 black SUVs with government plates turned the corner. Behind them was a sheriff's cruiser, Sheriff Miller. He wasn't trusting the feds to do his dirty work. He was there to ensure she didn't talk before they took her away. I slammed on the accelerator. The Suburban surged forward, a 5,000-pound missile. I laid on the horn, a deafening blast that made Rosa jump. She looked up and saw me. Recognition flooded her face. "Get in!" I screamed through the PA system installed in the grill. I slammed on the brakes, drifting the heavy vehicle sideways to create a shield between her and the approaching convoy. The passenger door unlocked with a heavy clunk. Rosa didn't hesitate. She threw her bag inside and scrambled into the seat. Before she could even close the door, I floored it. The sheriff's cruiser activated its lights and sirens. The black SUVs accelerated. They weren't trying to pull me over. They were trying to ram me. "Hold on," I told Rosa. Her hands were gripping the dashboard, her knuckles white. "Mr. Jefferson," she cried. "They are going to kill us." "Not today," I said. I took a hard left down an alleyway, scraping the paint off the side of the truck against a brick wall. The side mirror sheared off with a screech of tearing metal. I checked the rearview camera. Miller was right behind me. He was driving aggressively, dangerously. He didn't care about collateral damage. We burst out of the alley onto a main avenue. I needed space. I needed to use the weight of this vehicle to my advantage. I merged onto the freeway on-ramp, cutting off a delivery truck that blared its horn. Miller followed his siren wailing. Then came the impact. One of the black SUVs pulled alongside me and swerved hard, slamming into my rear quarter panel. It was a pit maneuver designed to spin me out. But they underestimated the density of Jerome's car. The SUV bounced off me like a toy car. I barely felt the shudder in the steering wheel. I looked to my left. Sheriff Miller was pulling up beside me. He rolled down his window. He wasn't holding a radio. He was holding a handgun. He fired. Crack, crack, crack. Spiderwebs appeared on my driver's side window. Rosa screamed and ducked. The glass held. It was rated to stop rifle fire. A 9mm pistol was an insult. I looked at Miller. He looked shocked that I was still driving. I turned the wheel slightly to the left. I didn't ram him, I just nudged him. At 70 miles an hour, a nudge from an armored truck is catastrophic. Miller's cruiser wobbled, corrected, and then spun across 3 lanes of traffic, slamming into the concrete median in a cloud of dust and smoke. 1 down, 2 to go. But I couldn't keep this up. The helicopter unit would be overhead in minutes. I needed to disappear. I needed a place where the rules of the road didn't apply. I saw the exit sign for the industrial district. I smiled grimly. I knew exactly where I was going. 3 months ago, Atlas Holdings had paused funding on a massive construction project due to safety violations. It was a 20-story steel skeleton of a building abandoned and fenced off. I knew the site. I had reviewed the blueprints myself. I knew the load-bearing points. I yanked the wheel to the right, taking the exit ramp on 2 wheels. The remaining government SUVs followed. They were relentless. I smashed through the chain-link fence of the construction site. The tires kicked up clouds of gravel and dust. I drove deep into the structure, weaving between piles of rebar and concrete pillars. The SUVs followed their suspension systems, groaning over the rough terrain. I headed for the central support scaffolding. It was a temporary structure holding up a ton of steel beams meant for the third floor. At the base of the scaffolding sat a yellow bulldozer, keys likely removed, but I didn't need to drive it. I just needed to hit it. I checked the rearview mirror. The lead SUV was 50 feet behind me. "Rosa, put your head between your knees and cover your ears," I commanded. I lined up the shot. I wasn't aiming for the exit. I was aiming for the main support brace of the scaffolding right where it met the bulldozer's blade. I accelerated. The engine roared one last time. I braced myself. The impact was like hitting a wall. The airbag didn't deploy because Jerome had disabled them for tactical driving, but the seatbelt bit into my chest. The front of the Suburban crumpled, absorbing the force. We hit the steel brace and drove it backward into the bulldozer. The structure groaned. It was a sound like a dying giant, a high-pitched screech of metal shearing under impossible weight. I threw the truck into reverse. The tires spun, searching for traction on the loose gravel. We shot backward just as the sky began to fall. Tons of steel pipes, wooden planks, and concrete blocks cascaded down. It was an avalanche of industrial waste. The debris slammed into the ground directly in front of the pursuing SUVs. The lead vehicle slammed on its brakes, but it was too late. The front end was buried under a mountain of steel. The second SUV swerved and crashed into a concrete pillar. Dust billowed out thick and gray, choking the air and blocking all visibility. We were safe. The road behind us was blocked by an impenetrable wall of wreckage. I stopped the truck in the shadows of the unfinished parking structure. The engine was smoking, but it was still running. I looked at Rosa. She was shaking, tears streaming down her dusty face, but she was unharmed. "You are crazy, Mr. Jefferson," she whispered. "You are absolutely crazy." "I am an engineer, Rosa," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. "I know how things fall." We got out of the truck. We couldn't stay there. We had to move on foot to the extraction point Jerome had set up a mile away. Rosa grabbed her bag. Then she reached into her pocket. "Mr. Jefferson," she said, her voice trembling, "I have something for you. I took it from the trash before I left." She handed me a phone. It wasn't hers. The screen was cracked, the casing scuffed. It was an old iPhone. "This is Tyson's," I said, recognizing the custom case I had given him for Christmas 2 years ago. "He threw it away last night," Rosa said, "after the police left. He smashed it and threw it in the kitchen bin. He thought it was broken. But I kept it. I thought maybe it had the truth inside." I took the phone. I pressed the power button. The screen flickered, glitched, and then lit up. The battery was low, but it was alive. It wasn't locked. Tyson was too arrogant for passcodes on his burner phones. I opened the messages. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just text messages. It was a ledger of damnation. There were hundreds of messages to a contact named V. Vargas. They weren't just about gambling debts. They were about drops, pickups, routing numbers. Tyson wasn't just a gambler who owed money. He was washing money. He was using his tech startup, the company I had funded, to launder cartel profits. He was funneling dirty cash through his server costs and consulting fees. That was why he needed control of Atlas Holdings, not just to pay a debt. He needed a bigger washing machine. If he controlled my fund, he could wash millions. He could become a kingpin. And there, at the bottom of the thread, was the smoking gun. A text sent 3 days ago. "V, the old man is a problem. He asks too many questions about the books. Tyson. Don't worry, he is coming to dinner on Tuesday. He won't be a problem after that. We are going to bury him." I stared at the screen. My own son had sold me out not just for survival, but for ambition. He was willing to trade my life for a seat at the cartel's table. I looked at Rosa. She had no idea what she had just handed me. She had handed me the nuclear option. "Let's go, Rosa," I said, pocketing the phone. "We have an appointment." "With the police?" she asked. "No," I said, my voice cold as the steel beams around us. "The police work for Miller. This phone doesn't go to the cops." I looked at the text message again. V. Vargas. "We are going to see the man who holds the leash," I said. "Tyson thinks he can play gangster. I am going to introduce him to the real thing." We walked out into the dusty sunlight. The sirens were wailing behind us, trapped behind the wall of steel I had brought down. But I wasn't running away anymore. I was walking toward the fire, and I was bringing gasoline. I scrolled through the messages on Tyson's shattered iPhone, and the full picture of my son's betrayal finally resolved into focus. It was not just gambling debts, it was something far worse. Tyson was not losing his own money, he was losing theirs. The text thread with V. Vargas outlined a complex laundering scheme where Tyson used the server maintenance costs of Nexus Tech to wash cartel drug profits. But Tyson had gotten greedy. He had started skimming off the top to pay for his lifestyle and his wife's demands. Then he tried to double the money on high-risk bets to pay it back, and he lost it all. He had lost $5 million of cartel principal. Vargas was not just hunting him for a debt, he was hunting him for theft. I sat in the passenger seat of Jerome's armored SUV and looked at the contact info for Vargas. It was a direct line. I knew who Vargas was. Everyone in the construction business knew him. He was the silent owner of half the concrete supply chain in the state. He was a businessman who dealt in blood. Jerome watched me. "You are not going to call him Langston. That is suicide. I am not going to call him," I said. "I am going to visit him." I dialed the number. It rang 4 times. "Who is this?" a voice answered. It was smooth, cultured, and terrifying. "This is the man who designed the foundation of your house in Calabasas 20 years ago," I said. "I know about the panic room behind the wine cellar. I know about the ventilation shaft that leads to the storm drain. I want to make a deal." There was a long silence. Then Vargas spoke. "Come to the meatpacking plant on Industrial Way. Come alone. You have 20 minutes. I hung up. Jerome looked at me like I was insane. "Langston," he said. "You can't go there. He will kill you the moment you walk in the door." "He won't kill me," I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out a tube of old blueprints I had saved for 2 decades. "Because I'm the only one who knows where the structural weakness is." I took the SUV. I left Jerome at the extraction point with instructions to release the files to the FBI if I didn't call in an hour. I drove to the industrial district. The smell of the ocean was replaced by the copper tang of blood and sawdust. I pulled into the loading dock of the meatpacking plant. 2 men in suits were waiting. They patted me down. They took my pocket knife. They took my burner phone. They led me through heavy plastic curtains into the refrigerated interior. The cold hit me instantly. It was 0 degrees inside. Carcasses of beef hung from hooks on a motorized rail, moving slowly through the gloom. In the center of the room, sitting on a folding chair under a single spotlight, was Vargas. He was wearing a camel hair coat and eating an apple with a knife. He watched me approach. He didn't stand up. "Mr. Jefferson," Vargas said, "the father of the thief. I saw you on the news. They say you are a drug dealer." "We both know that is a lie," I said, my breath steaming in the cold air. "My son framed me to get my money so he could pay you." Vargas nodded slowly. He tried, but he failed. "And now you are here. Why should I not peel your skin off right here and send it to Tyson as a reminder of his due date? Because I have something you want more than revenge," I said. I placed the tube of blueprints on a stainless steel table. I unrolled them. They were architectural drawings, detailed schematics of a fortress. 20 years ago, I said, keeping my voice steady, you hired a shell company to design a secure compound. You wanted a bunker that could withstand a nuclear blast and a DEA raid. You wanted a tunnel system that didn't appear on city surveys, I remember Vargas said. The architect was a ghost. Never met him. I was the ghost, I said. I designed the load-bearing walls, I designed the hydraulic lift in the garage, and I designed the weakness. Vargas stopped eating his apple. What weakness? Every fortress has a thermal exhaust port, I said. There is a structural flaw in the north wall of your tunnel. It connects directly to the city's main sewage line. If someone were to say, place a small charge there, or simply leak the location to your rivals in the Sinaloa cartel, your fortress would become a tomb. Vargas stood up. He walked over to me. He pulled a silver pistol from his coat pocket and pressed the barrel against my forehead. The metal was warmer than the air in the room. You are threatening me in my own house, Vargas whispered. I am not threatening you, I said, staring into his eyes. I am negotiating. If I die, an email goes out to every cartel boss in Mexico with these blueprints attached. If I disappear, the location of your tunnel goes public. You can kill me, but you will lose your sanctuary. Vargas stared at me for a long minute. He was calculating the risk. He was a businessman. He knew the cost of war. He lowered the gun. He laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement. You have balls, engineer. I like that. Your son has none. He is a worm. He is, I agreed, and that is why I am here. I want to pay his debt. Vargas raised an eyebrow. You have $5 million on you. No, I said. But I can give you something better. I can give you the satisfaction of justice, and I can guarantee you get your money when the dust settles. Vargas leaned against the table. I am listening. Tyson framed me, I said. He tried to destroy my life. He thinks he is safe because he has the sheriff in his pocket. He thinks he can hide behind the law. I want you to hunt him, I said. Vargas smiled. I was going to do that anyway. No, I said. Not like that. I don't want you to kill him. Not yet. If you kill him now, he becomes a martyr. He becomes the tragic victim of a drug deal gone wrong. He never has to answer for what he did to me. I stepped closer. I want you to terrify him, I said. I want you to strip away his safety net. I want you to demand your money in a way that forces him to show his true face to the world. I want you to break his ego before you break his legs. And how do I do that? Vargas asked. He is hiding in his house, I said. He thinks he is untouchable. Send a message, not a text, a physical message. Show him that the sheriff cannot protect him. Make him realize that his only way out is to confess to the frame-up. And my money, Vargas asked. When Tyson is in prison, I said I will take control of his assets, I will sell his company, I will sell his house, and I will pay you every cent he stole, but only if he is alive to go to trial. Only if his reputation is destroyed first. Vargas looked at the blueprints. He looked at me. You are a cold man, Jefferson Vargas said. You would trade your son to the wolf to clear your name. He is not my son, I said. The man who planted cocaine in a baby's cradle is a stranger to me. Vargas nodded. He put the gun away. We have a deal, engineer. I will not kill him. Yet. But I will make him wish he was dead. I will make him scream so loud the whole city hears it. That is all I ask, I said. Vargas gestured to his men. Give him his things. Let him go. I rolled up the blueprints. I put them back in the tube. One more thing, Vargas said as I turned to leave. If you are lying about the email trigger, I will find you, and I will make it slow. I am an engineer, Mr. Vargas, I said. I built the system. It works. I walked out of the meat locker. My hands were numb from the cold, but my blood was burning. I had just made a deal with the devil. I had unleashed a cartel hit squad on my own son. But as I drove back to the city, I felt no guilt. Tyson had started this fire. I was just controlling the burn. I checked my burner phone. I had a message from Jerome. Victoria tried to board a flight to Paris. We stopped her. The pieces were falling into place. The trap was set. Now I just needed to bait it. I dialed Jerome. Send the file, I said. Send the evidence of the affair to Tyson. It was time to light the fuse. Tyson was about to find out that he wasn't fighting a lonely old man. He was fighting a war on two fronts, and he was out of ammunition. I sat in the passenger seat of the armored SUV parked on a ridge overlooking the city lights. Jerome was typing on his laptop, the blue light reflecting off his glasses. My burner phone sat on the dashboard. It was silent, but I knew the silence was temporary. The first domino had been pushed over in the meat locker with Vargas. The second domino was about to fall at Los Angeles International Airport. Victoria was running. We knew she would. When the facts from Atlas Holdings arrived, destroying their financial future, and when she realized Vargas would not accept excuses, her survival instinct overrode her greed. She didn't care about Tyson. She didn't care about the baby. She cared about Victoria. Jerome's surveillance team had tracked her movements. She had drained the last of the Nexus Tech operating accounts payroll money meant for the employees she despised and converted it into cryptocurrency. She had packed a single Louis Vuitton carry-on. She had booked a one-way ticket to Paris on Air France flight AF069, departing at 7 in the evening. She thought she was escaping the blast radius. She didn't realize I controlled the airspace. He is checking in now, Jerome said, his eyes glued to the screen. She's at the first-class counter. I imagined her standing there. She would be wearing oversized sunglasses and a trench coat, trying to look like just another wealthy tourist. She would be tapping her foot, checking her watch, her heart pounding against her ribs. She would be thinking about the cafes on the Seine. She would be thinking she had won. Flag it, I said. Jerome hit a key. He didn't need a court order. He didn't need a judge. Jerome had spent 30 years defending people the government wanted to bury. He knew the system's back doors. He had a contact in the Department of Homeland Security, a man who owed Jerome his career. A simple notification had been placed in the database. A high-risk flight alert, linked to a pending federal financial investigation. I watched the digital tracker. Victoria's status changed from checked in to denied. At the counter, the agent would be frowning at the screen. She would be typing, then picking up the phone. Victoria would ask what was wrong. The agent would give her a polite, vague answer. "I am sorry, ma'am. There is a hold on your passport. You cannot board this flight," Victoria would argue. She would scream, she would demand to see a manager, but airport security would arrive. They wouldn't arrest her, not yet. They would simply escort her out of the terminal. They would tell her to resolve the issue with the State Department. She was trapped. She has left the terminal, Jerome confirmed. She is getting into a taxi. She is heading back to the house. She had nowhere else to go. Her credit cards were maxed out or frozen. She couldn't check into a hotel without leaving a digital trail she was now terrified of creating. She had to go back to the fortress she thought was safe. She had to go back to Tyson. But she wasn't going back to a husband. She was going back to a man who had just received the worst news of his life. I picked up my burner phone. It was time for the second blow. Tyson was alone in the mansion. He was likely pacing the floors high on anxiety and whatever pharmaceuticals he could find in the medicine cabinet. He was waiting for Victoria to come home with a solution. He didn't know she had tried to abandon him. He didn't know she had stolen his company's lifeline. And he didn't know about Sheriff Miller. I opened the file Jerome had compiled. It was a folder of digital misery, photos taken by a private investigator 6 months ago. Victoria and Sheriff Miller at a motel in Santa Monica. Victoria and Miller in his squad car parked in a secluded canyon. Text messages, explicit, detailed, mocking Tyson's weakness, mocking his inability to satisfy her, mocking his gullibility. One text stood out. "He is such a child. I will leave him as soon as the old man kicks the bucket and we get the insurance. Just be patient, baby." I attached the file to a text message. I didn't add a caption. The images spoke for themselves. I pressed send. I imagined the sound of the notification chime echoing in the empty hallway of my son's house. Tyson would pick up the phone, he would see the images. His world was already cracking. The threat from Vargas, the bankruptcy of his company, the police raid. He was fragile. He was a man standing on a ledge. This message was the shove. Jerome looked at me. "You really want to do this?" he asked. "Once he sees those, there is no going back. He might kill her." "He tried to kill me," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "He tried to kill his father for money she convinced him he needed. He needs to know who he sold his soul to." I watched the GPS tracker on Victoria's phone. She was 10 minutes away from the house. Tyson had 10 minutes to let the poison work through his system. 10 minutes to realize that the wife he had framed me for, the wife he had stolen, for the wife he was risking his life for, had been laughing at him the entire time. The rage of a weak man is a dangerous thing. It is unpredictable. It is volatile. Victoria pulled into the driveway. She walked to the front door. She was angry about the flight. She was ready to blame Tyson for the hold on her passport. She was ready to scream at him for not fixing things. She opened the door. I signaled Jerome. Switched to the internal feed. The monitors flickered. The living room of the mansion appeared. Tyson was sitting on the white leather sofa. He was shirtless. He was sweating. His eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. He held his phone in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. It was a chef's knife, 8 inches of German steel. Victoria walked in. She threw her bag on the floor. "You are useless!" she screamed, storming into the room. "They wouldn't let me fly. The accounts are frozen. Why didn't you fix it? Why are you just sitting there?" Tyson didn't blink. He stood up slowly. He held up the phone. She stopped. She squinted at the screen. Her face went pale. The arrogance drained out of her, replaced by a sudden primal fear. "Tyson," she whispered, "where did you get that?" "You told him," Tyson said. His voice was a rasp, a sound like tearing paper. "You told the sheriff I was a loser. You told him you were waiting for my dad to die." Victoria took a step back. "Tyson, listen to me. That is fake. Your dad sent that. He is trying to divide us." "Divide us." Tyson laughed. It was a high manic shriek. "You were leaving me. You tried to get on a plane. You stole the money, and you left me here for Vargas." He lunged. Victoria screamed and tried to run, but he was faster. He grabbed her by the hair. He threw her onto the sofa. He pinned her down, the knife pressing against the soft skin of her throat. I watched my hands gripping the edge of the desk. This was it, the implosion. But Tyson didn't kill her. He wanted an audience. He wanted the world to see his pain. He was a narcissist to the end. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another phone. He opened Instagram. He started a live stream. Millions of notifications went out. "Tyson Jefferson is live." Within seconds, the viewer count jumped. People were hungry for the drama. They had seen the news about the drug raid. They wanted to see the fallout. They got more than they bargained for. The camera shook as Tyson held it up. It showed his face twisted and wet with tears and sweat. Then he turned it to Victoria. She was sobbing, the knife blade indenting her skin. "Say hello." "Victoria," Tyson screamed at the phone. "Tell everyone what you did." "Please, Tyson," Victoria begged. "You are high." "Put the knife down." "I am not high. I am awake," Tyson yelled. He looked into the camera lens. His eyes were wild. "You want the truth. You want to know about Langston Jefferson. My father." I held my breath. "He didn't do it," Tyson shouted. "He didn't bring the drugs. We did." "She did." He pointed the knife at Victoria. "She made me do it. She put the cocaine in the cradle. She told me we needed the insurance money because I owed Vargas. She told me to kill him." Victoria was shaking her head, sobbing. Shut up, I won't shut up," Tyson roared. He leaned closer to the phone. "My dad is innocent. I framed him. I lied to the police. I lied to the news. I am the criminal. Me and her. She is the devil. She slept with the sheriff to keep us safe. She slept with Miller." The viewer count skyrocketed. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. The comments were a blur of shock and horror. "And now you try to leave me," Tyson screamed, pressing the knife harder. A thin line of red appeared on Victoria's neck. "You try to run to Paris with my money. No, we are going to die here together. Vargas is coming. I can hear him, but I am going to finish this first." He was confessing to everything. Conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder, drug trafficking. He was naming names. He was destroying the narrative they had built with a sledgehammer. I looked at Jerome. "Record it," I said, unnecessarily. Jerome was already saving the stream to 3 different servers. Tyson looked at the camera one last time. "Dad, if you are watching," Tyson whispered, his voice suddenly small, suddenly like the boy I used to know. "I am sorry. I was weak. She told me you were worth more dead." He dropped the phone. It fell onto the cushion facing up. The feed continued. I could see the ceiling fan spinning. I could hear Victoria screaming. I could hear the sound of furniture breaking. Then I heard sirens. Not on the screen. Outside the window on the screen. The police were there. Sheriff Miller couldn't protect them from this. Not when 100,000 people were watching a hostage situation live. Not when his own name had been dragged through the mud. Miller would be the first one through the door, and he wouldn't be coming to save them. He would be coming to silence them. "We have to go," I told Jerome. "Where?" Jerome asked. "To the house," I said. "Tyson just signed his own death warrant. Miller is going to kill them both and claim Tyson was an active shooter." I stood up. I wasn't going to let Miller steal my justice. I wasn't going to let him kill my son. Tyson belonged to the legal system now. He belonged to a cell. And I had the key to get the police inside before Miller could pull the trigger. "Drive, Jerome. Drive fast." The tires of the armored SUV tore up the asphalt as Jerome navigated the winding roads of the hills with a terrifying precision. I sat in the passenger seat, clutching the dashboard, watching the live stream on my phone. The viewer count had surpassed 200,000. My son was still screaming at the camera, his face a mask of sweat and terror, while Victoria sobbed in the background. But it was what I saw in the periphery of the video that chilled my blood. Through the window behind Tyson, I saw blue and red strobe lights flashing against the trees. The police had arrived, but they were not moving in to negotiate. Sheriff Miller was out there. I knew exactly what was going through his mind. He was watching his career, his freedom, and his life crumble in real time on a social media feed. Every word Tyson spoke was a nail in Miller's coffin. Tyson was confessing to the conspiracy. He was confessing to the frame job. And eventually, if he kept talking, he would confess to the affair between his wife and the sheriff. Miller had only one option left. He had to silence the witness. I heard the police scanner crackle on Jerome's laptop. The voice was distorted, but the command was clear. "Suspects are armed and erratic. We have a hostage situation. Authorization to use lethal force is granted. Repeat lethal force is granted to neutralize the threat." They were going to kill them. Miller had classified it as an active shooter scenario. He was going to send a SWAT team through the door with orders to shoot first and ask questions never. He would claim Tyson pointed a weapon. He would claim he had no choice. And then he would bury the investigation just like he tried to bury me. "Faster, Jerome," I growled. "We are 2 minutes out. Jerome said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I have already called the news choppers. They are overhead. Miller cannot kill them in the dark. But Miller didn't need darkness. He had a badge. He could kill them in broad daylight and call it heroism. On the screen, Tyson suddenly looked away from the camera. He dropped the knife. He grabbed Victoria by the arm and dragged her toward the kitchen. The feed shook violently, then went dark as the phone fell face down on the carpet. The audio continued. I heard glass breaking. I heard a woman screaming. Not Victoria. A different voice. They had grabbed the housekeeper. Not Rosa. The new one. An innocent woman caught in the crossfire of my family's self-destruction. We screeched around the final corner. The scene looked like a war zone. Police cruisers formed a barricade across the driveway. An armored personnel carrier was moving into position on the lawn, crushing the rose bushes I had planted for Victoria 3 years ago. Sharpshooters were positioning themselves on the hoods of cars' rifles trained on the front door. Jerome didn't stop at the barricade. He drove the SUV onto the sidewalk, bypassing the line of police cars and slamming the brakes right next to the command center. We jumped out. Police officers immediately turned their weapons on us, shouting for us to get on the ground. I did not get on the ground. I walked straight toward the man standing by the trunk of the lead cruiser, Sheriff Miller. He looked at me, and for a second his composure cracked. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Then his eyes narrowed into slits of pure hatred. "Get this man out of here," Miller shouted at his deputies. "This is an active crime scene. I am the father of the suspect," I roared, my voice carrying over the sound of the helicopter rotors overhead. "And I know what you are doing, Miller." Miller stepped forward, his hand resting on his holster. "Your son has taken a hostage, Mr. Jefferson. He is armed and dangerous. We are preparing to breach. You are preparing to execute him," I said, stepping into his personal space. "I know about the affair. I know about the cover-up, and so do 200,000 people on the internet. If you send your men in there with guns blazing, you will spend the rest of your life in federal prison." Miller smiled, a cold, dead smile. He pointed to the house. "He has a knife to a hostage's throat. My men have a duty to protect innocent life. If he makes one wrong move, we take the shot. Breach in 30 seconds. He turned away, dismissing me. He raised his radio to give the order. Jerome stepped in, then holding up his phone, which was broadcasting live to his own legal social media channel. "Sheriff Miller, you are on the record. Any action taken without negotiation will be considered a violation of due process and a potential extrajudicial killing." Miller hesitated, but only for a second. "Breach on my Mark III too." I didn't let him finish. I didn't try to tackle him. I didn't try to fight the police. I ran to the SWAT van parked on the lawn. I grabbed the megaphone sitting on the bumper. The officers shouted at me to stop, but I ignored them. I ran toward the house, stopping just outside the effective range of the tear gas launchers. I raised the megaphone to my lips. "Tyson," I shouted. My voice boomed off the stucco walls, echoing through the neighborhood. Inside the house, I knew he could hear me. I knew he was cowering in the hallway, terrified out of his mind. "Listen to me, son," I continued. "The police are coming in. They are not coming to arrest you. They are coming to kill you. Miller is out here. He wants you dead." There was silence from the house. Then a scream. "Leave us alone." "Tyson," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You have one chance to live. You have to surrender right now. You have to walk out that front door with your hands up." "I can't," Tyson screamed back. "The doors are locked. The shutters are down. I can't get out." I looked at the house. He was right. When I had trapped them earlier, I had engaged the magnetic locks and the steel shutters. They were sealed inside a vault, and Miller knew it. He knew they were trapped like rats in a barrel waiting to be shot. Miller yelled at his team. "Breach, blow the hinges, go, go, go." The SWAT team moved forward carrying a battering ram and explosive charges. They were going to blow the door and rush in firing. I lowered the megaphone. I looked at the house I had paid for, the house I had secured, the house I had designed to keep my family safe. I knew its secrets. I knew its code. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second. I wasn't saving my son because he deserved it. I was saving him because death was too easy. He needed to answer for his crimes. He needed to sit in a cell and rot. And Miller needed to lose. I raised the megaphone again. I didn't speak to Tyson. I spoke to the house itself. I spoke to the central processor buried in the basement wall. Omega 774. I commanded. The sound was immediate. It was the sound of heavy machinery disengaging. A deep mechanical clunk resonated from inside the walls. The magnetic locks released with a hiss of pneumatic pressure. The steel shutters on the ground floor windows began to retract, screeching metal on metal as they rolled up. The front door clicked and swung open slowly, creaking on its hinges. The SWAT team froze. They had been prepared to blow the door, not walk through it. The sudden opening disrupted their rhythm. It broke their momentum. "Get down!" I screamed at the house. "Get on the floor now!" Through the open door and the rising shutters, the interior of the house was suddenly visible to everyone. To the police, to the news cameras, to the neighbors watching from their windows. There was nowhere to hide. Tyson stood in the hallway, blinking in the sudden influx of searchlights. He held the knife, but his arm was hanging limp at his side. He looked small. He looked pathetic. He saw the open door. He saw the wall of police officers. He dropped the knife. It clattered on the hardwood floor. He fell to his knees, putting his hands on his head, sobbing uncontrollably. Victoria was behind him, curled into a ball against the wall. The hostage, the housekeeper, ran past them, sprinting out the open door and into the arms of a paramedic. "Hold fire," I shouted, pointing at my unarmed son. "He has surrendered. The threat is neutralized." Sheriff Miller looked furious. He had lost his window. He couldn't order his men to shoot a man who was kneeling with his hands on his head on national television. Not when the door was wide open. Not when the threat was gone. "Move in." Miller barked, his voice tight with rage. "Secure the suspects." The SWAT team rushed in. They swarmed Tyson and Victoria. I watched as they were thrown to the ground and handcuffed. I watched as they were dragged out of the house, not as bodies in bags, but as prisoners. I lowered the megaphone. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the sheer force of will it had taken to keep standing. Jerome walked up to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Langston. They are alive. They are alive." I agreed, watching them being shoved into the back of a squad car. "And now, they are going to talk." Sheriff Miller walked past us. He wouldn't look at me. He got into his car and slammed the door. He knew it was over. Tyson would trade everything he knew for a plea deal. He would give up Miller to save himself from the death penalty. Miller was a walking corpse, and he knew it. I walked toward the police line. A young officer tried to stop me, but I just looked at him, and he stepped aside. I walked up to the squad car where Tyson sat. The window was down. He looked at me. His face was a mess of tears and snot. He looked like he wanted me to save him. He looked like he wanted his father to fix it. "Daddy," he whispered, "help me." I looked at him. I looked at the house. I looked at the ruin of my family. I leaned in close so only he could hear me. "I just did help you, son," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "I saved your life. Now you are going to spend the rest of it paying me back." I turned away. The cameras were flashing. The reporters were shouting my name. Mrs. Caldwell, the neighbor, was watching from her porch, her hand over her mouth. I walked back to Jerome. "Let's go," I said. "Where?" Jerome asked. "To the office," I said. "I have a company to restructure, and I have a lawsuit to file." As we drove away, I didn't look back. The house was open, exposed to the world, just like the truth. There were no more secrets, no more shadows, just the cold, hard light of justice. And I was the one holding the switch. The click of the handcuffs ratcheting tight around my son's wrists was a sound I had dreaded for 30 years. But in this moment, it sounded like the only truth left in the world. Tyson was being dragged across his own manicured lawn, his Italian leather shoes scraping against the pavement. He was thrashing against the grip of 2 federal agents, his face a mask of snot and tears. He looked like a child who had been told playtime was over. Then he saw me. I was standing by the SWAT van, my arms crossed over my chest, watching the demolition of his life. I expected him to hang his head. I expected shame. I expected him to look at the ground and accept that his greed had finally cost him everything. But Tyson was not built like that. He was built on entitlement. He was built on the delusion that the world owed him a living. He lunged toward me, straining against the cuffs. "Dad," he screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "Dad, you have to stop them. You have to fix this." I didn't move. I didn't blink. "This is a mistake," Tyson yelled, spitting flying from his mouth. "I am a CEO. I have investors. You are ruining everything." The agents tried to shove him toward the waiting cruiser, but he planted his feet. He looked at me with eyes wide with panic. Not panic about prison, panic about money. "Dad, listen to me," he pleaded. "The deal, the Atlas deal, it was supposed to close tomorrow. $10 million. If I go to jail, the deal falls through. They will pull the funding. You are going to cost me my company." I stared at him. He was being arrested for conspiracy to commit murder. He was facing life in prison. And he was worried about a wire transfer. He was worried about his valuation. He was so consumed by the game, he didn't realize the board had been flipped over. "You don't understand," Tyson shouted, desperate now. "Atlas Holdings. They are the only thing keeping me alive. If they walk away, I am dead. Vargas will kill me in my cell. You have to call your lawyer. You have to tell them this was a misunderstanding. You are ruining a multi-million-dollar merger." The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its absolute detachment from reality. He had tried to frame me for drug trafficking. He had tried to have me killed by the police. He had tried to steal my home. And now he was demanding I save his business deal because he thought I was too stupid to understand high finance. He thought I was just a retired mechanic who didn't understand the stakes. He thought he was the smartest man in the room. I stepped off the curb. The media cameras were flashing blinding white strobes in the darkness. The reporters were shouting questions. I ignored them all. I walked straight toward my son. The agents tensed, but they didn't stop me. They saw the look on my face. It was the look of a man who had come to bury the dead. I stopped 2 feet from Tyson. I could smell the sweat and the fear on him. "You are worried about Atlas Holdings?" I asked, my voice low and steady. "Yes," Tyson gasped, nodding frantically. "Yes, Dad. They are the investors. They are the money. If they see this, they will pull out. You have to fix it." I reached into the inner pocket of my flannel jacket. I moved slowly, deliberately. Tyson watched my hand, hoping I was reaching for a checkbook or a phone to call a high-powered friend. I pulled out a small leather case. I opened it and extracted a single card. It wasn't paper. It was heavy brushed steel plated in 24-karat gold. It caught the glare of the police floodlights and shone like a beacon. I stepped into Tyson's personal space. I reached out and tucked the card into the breast pocket of his torn dress shirt. "Read it," I said. Tyson looked down. He struggled to focus his eyes. He read the card, then he read it again. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like his heart had stopped beating. His knees buckled. The agents had to hold him up. "Atlas Holdings," the card read in embossed lettering, and below it a single name, Langston Jefferson, founder and chairman of the board. Tyson looked up at me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His brain was trying to process the impossible. The venture capital firm that had funded his startup. The mysterious board of directors he had been trying to impress for 5 years. The source of his salary, his car, his house, and his ego. It wasn't a conglomerate in Switzerland. It wasn't a faceless bank. "It was me," Tyson whispered. "It was you. It was always me, son." I said, my voice cold enough to freeze the air between us. "I funded Nexus Tech. I approved the seed round. I approved the Series A. I wanted you to succeed. I wanted to give you a chance to build something." Tyson shook his head in denial. No. You are a mechanic. You fix trucks. I am an engineer," I corrected him. "And I am an investor. I built an empire while you were busy playing dress-up." I leaned closer, my face inches from his. "You tried to kill your angel investor, Tyson. You tried to frame the chairman of the board. You didn't just bite the hand that fed you. You tried to cut it off." Tyson began to hyperventilate. The reality of his situation crashed down on him with the weight of a skyscraper. He hadn't just committed a crime. He had committed the ultimate act of self-destruction. He had spent 5 years stealing from his father, thinking he was stealing from a corporation. He had tried to murder the only person on Earth who had a vested interest in keeping him alive. "I sent the facts, Tyson," I said. "I pulled the funding. I recalled the loans. You are not just going to prison. You are going to prison bankrupt. You own nothing. Your company is mine. Your house is mine. Your future is mine." Tyson let out a sound that was not human. It was the wail of a man watching his soul evaporate. He sagged in the agent's arms, weeping uncontrollably. "I am sorry, Dad," he sobbed. I didn't know. I didn't know you had the money. That is the problem, I said, stepping back. You only respect the money. You never respected the man. The agents began to drag him away. He was dead weight now, a broken thing. Wait. A scream cut through the night air. It came from the second squad car. The window was down. Victoria was watching. She had seen the card. She had seen the gold glinting in the light. She had heard my words. She was thrashing against the grate, separating her from the front seat. Her face was pressed against the glass, distorted and ugly with greed. "You have the money," she screamed, her voice shrill and piercing. "You are Atlas Holdings." She wasn't looking at Tyson. She wasn't looking at the house she had lost. She was looking at me. "I could have had it all," she shrieked, tearing at her hair. "I married him for nothing. I put up with him for nothing. You had the billions." She realized the magnitude of her miscalculation. She had thought I was a poor old man. She had thought Tyson was her ticket to wealth if she could just get rid of me. She had traded a father-in-law who owned half the city for a sheriff who was about to be indicted. She had been sleeping with a pauper while trying to kill a king. I walked over to her car. I looked through the window. "You bet on the wrong Jefferson Victoria," I said. She screamed a primal sound of pure materialistic agony. She threw herself against the door, clawing at the glass. She looked like a demon trapped in a bottle. "Take them away," I said to the officers. The squad cars roared to life. Sirens wailed. I watched them drive down the long, winding driveway of the estate. I watched the taillights disappear into the darkness. I stood alone on the lawn. The media was shouting my name, asking for a statement, asking about Atlas Holdings, asking about the drugs. Jerome walked up beside me. He handed me a bottle of water. "You okay, Langston?" he asked. I looked at the house. It was dark now. The party was over. The guests were gone. The family was gone. "I am fine, Jerome," I said. I took the gold card out of my pocket where I had a spare. I looked at it. It was just metal. It was just a name. It couldn't buy loyalty. It couldn't buy love. It couldn't buy a son who wanted to be a good man. It could only buy justice. And justice was a cold companion. "Sell the house," I said, turning my back on the mansion. "Liquidate Nexus Tech. Fire everyone who knew about the laundering. Burn it down, Jerome. I want the earth salted." Jerome nodded. "And the money. Put it in the trust," I said, "for the grandchild I haven't met yet. Maybe the next generation will have a better foundation." We walked to the armored SUV. The cameras flashed, blinding me, but I didn't shield my eyes. I walked with my head up. I was Langston Jefferson. I had built bridges. I had built towers. And tonight I had demolished the rot that had threatened to bring it all down. It was done. 6 months had passed since the night of the raid. I sat in my new office on the 45th floor of the Atlas building, looking out at the city I had helped construct. The phone on my desk rang. It was a specific line, a dedicated number I had set up for one purpose only. I knew who it was before I picked it up. I pressed the speaker button. A robotic voice announced that I had a collect call from the Metropolitan Detention Center. I accepted the charges. "Dad." The voice on the other end was barely recognizable. It was wet, broken, and trembling. "Dad, please tell me you are there." "I am here, Tyson," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I need you." Tyson sobbed. "You have to get me out. You have to pay the bail." "The judge set it at $2 million. You have that kind of money. I know you do. You are Atlas. You can write a check and I can walk out of here today." I said nothing. I let the silence stretch across the line, heavy and suffocating. I could hear the background noise of the prison block, the shouting of other inmates, the clanging of steel doors. "They are hurting me, Dad." Tyson whispered, his voice dropping to a terrified whimper. "Vargas. He has people inside. I woke up yesterday and my mattress was soaked in blood. Not mine. Someone else's. They told me it was a warning. They said if I don't pay the $5 million by next week, they are going to take my eyes." I listened to his terror. It was genuine. For the first time in his life, Tyson wasn't acting. He was facing the consequences of borrowing money from devils. He had thought his status would protect him. He had thought the walls of a prison would keep the cartel out. He was wrong. The cartel owned the walls. "Look at my face," Dad, Tyson cried. "They broke my nose in the shower. I lost 2 teeth. I am eating through a straw. You can't leave me here. I am your flesh and blood. Please, just pay the bail. I will go into witness protection. I will disappear. I just need to get out of this cell." He sounded so small. He sounded like the child who used to call for me when he had a nightmare. But then I remembered the nightmare he had tried to inflict on me. I remembered the cocaine in the cradle. I remembered him standing on his lawn screaming that I was a drug lord. "I am coming to see you, Tyson," I said. He gasped a sound of pure relief. "Thank you." "Oh God, thank you, Dad. Bring the check. Please bring the check. Hurry." I hung up the phone. I didn't write a check. I opened my desk drawer and took out a single piece of paper. I folded it carefully and placed it in my pocket. I stood up and put on my jacket. I wasn't going to the prison to save my son. I was going to the prison to close the book. Tyson needed to understand that the bank of Langston Jefferson was not just closed, it had been demolished. The drive to the detention center was long and gray. Jerome drove. He didn't ask me what I was going to do. He knew. He had prepared the paperwork himself. We arrived at the facility. It was a fortress of concrete and razor wire. I went through security. I surrendered my phone, my keys, and my belt. I walked through the metal detectors. The air inside smelled of bleach and misery. I was led to the visitation room. It was a long hallway divided by thick plexiglass partitions. I sat down on a metal stool bolted to the floor. A few minutes later, the door on the other side opened. 2 guards escorted Tyson in. He looked worse than he had sounded. His face was a map of violence. His nose was swollen and purple, taped clumsily with medical gauze. His lip was split. One of his eyes was swollen shut. He walked with a limp shuffling in his orange jumpsuit and shackles. He looked like a man who had been chewed up by the machinery of the state and spit back out. He saw me, and his good eye lit up with a desperate, pathetic hope. He sat down and grabbed the phone on the wall. I picked up mine. "You came," Tyson said, pressing his hand against the glass. "Do you have it? Did you pay the bondsman? When can I leave?" I looked at him. I looked at the bruises. I felt a flicker of pity, but I extinguished it immediately. Pity was what had allowed him to steal from me for 5 years. Pity was the crack in the foundation that had almost brought the house down. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the folded paper. I unfolded it and pressed it against the glass so he could read it. Tyson squinted. He read the document. He frowned. "What is this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "This isn't a bail receipt. This is a retainer agreement." It was. It was a contract for legal services. "You hired a lawyer for me?" Tyson asked, hope flickering again. "Is it a high-powered defense attorney? Is it someone who can get the charges dropped?" I shook my head slowly. "No, Tyson," I said, my voice calm and amplified through the phone receiver. "I didn't hire a lawyer for you." I pointed to the name on the document. "Arthur Sterling." "Do you know who that is?" I asked. Tyson shook his head, confusion clouding his face. "He is the former Attorney General of the state," I explained. "He is the most ruthless prosecutor in the history of this jurisdiction. He has a 99% conviction rate. He doesn't defend criminals, Tyson. He hunts them." Tyson stared at me, the blood draining from his already pale face. "I hired him as a special consultant to the district attorney's office," I said. "I paid his fee myself. $500,000. "Why?" Tyson whispered. "Why would you do that?" "To ensure that there are no mistakes," I said. "To ensure that you don't get a plea deal. To ensure that you don't get off on a technicality. I hired him to make sure that you and Victoria receive the maximum sentence allowed by law." Tyson dropped the phone. It swung on its cord, hitting the metal wall with a clang. He stared at me through the glass, his mouth open in a silent scream of horror. He picked the phone up again, his hands shaking so hard he could barely hold it. "You hired a prosecutor to convict your own son," he shrieked. "I hired justice," I corrected him. "You tried to frame me for a crime that carries a life sentence. You tried to steal my life. I am just returning the favor. Sterling is going to use your own live stream against you. He is going to use the financial records. He is going to ensure you die in this prison." "No." Tyson moaned, tears mixing with the blood on his face. "No, Dad, please. You can't do this. I will be killed in here. Vargas will kill me." "Then you should have paid your debts," I said coldly. "Or better yet, you shouldn't have borrowed money from murderers to pretend you were a success." "Victoria is asking for a deal," he babbled, desperate to find any leverage. "She is going to testify against me. She is blaming me for everything." "I know," I said. "Sterling knows too. He is not going to give her a deal either. I gave him the evidence of her forgery. She is going down for just as long as you are. You are both going to rot together. Separate cells, but the same fate." Tyson slammed his fist against the glass. It didn't even vibrate. "I hate you," he screamed. "You are evil. You are a monster." I stood up. I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. I had seen enough. I had delivered the message. "I am not a monster, Tyson," I said, looking down at him. "I am a structural engineer. When a building is condemned, you don't patch the cracks. You bring it down so it doesn't hurt anyone else. You are a condemned building son. And I just signed the demolition order. I turned to walk away. Tyson jumped up. He slammed his body against the partition. The guards moved in, grabbing his arms. "Wait!" Tyson screamed, his voice raw and guttural. "Wait! You can't leave me. I am your son. Do you hear me? I am your son." I stopped. I stood there for a moment, listening to the echo of those words. I am your son. It was the phrase he had used to manipulate me for decades. It was the shield he had used to hide his dagger. I turned my head slightly, but I didn't look at him. I looked at the gray steel door that led to freedom. "My son is dead," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. Tyson stopped struggling. The guards held him, but he wasn't fighting anymore. He was listening. "My son died the day he planted drugs in a wooden cradle meant for his own child," I said. "He died the moment he decided his father was worth more as a corpse than as a human being." I looked back at him one last time. He looked like a ghost behind the glass. "You are just the man who killed him," I said. I hung up the phone. I walked out of the room. Behind me, I heard a sound that was not human. It was the sound of an animal caught in a trap, knowing there was no escape. It was the sound of Tyson realizing that his father, the man who had always fixed everything, had finally fixed him. I walked down the hallway past the guards, past the security checkpoints. I walked out into the sunlight. Jerome was waiting by the car. He opened the door. "Done?" he asked. "Done," I said. We drove away from the prison. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel relieved. I felt a deep, heavy silence where my heart used to be. But it was a clean silence. The rot was gone. The structure was sound. I was alone. But I was standing on solid ground. And for the first time in a long time, I could see the horizon. This text contains the final part of the story, part 13, written in the first-person perspective of Langston Jefferson. It is detailed, dramatic, conflict-driven, and adheres to the requested constraints. No headers, no special punctuation like ellipses, voiceover, friendly, and covers the three conflicts outlined. Here is the content. The auctioneer's gavel hit the podium with a sound like a gunshot echoing through the marble foyer of what used to be my son's mansion. Sold. The word hung in the air, final and absolute. The buyer was a tech mogul from Silicon Valley, a man who saw the glass and steel structure as a trophy. He didn't know the rot that had lived inside these walls. He didn't know about the cocaine planted in the cradle or the betrayal whispered in the kitchen. He just saw square footage and a zip code. I stood in the back of the room watching the spectacle. I had hired a crew to strip the house before the showing. We sold the furniture, the art, the ridiculous sculptures Tyson had bought to convince the world he was important. Every item that carried his scent was converted into cash. The proceeds were substantial. After paying off the mortgage and settling the legitimate debts Tyson had accrued, the surplus was in the millions. People expected me to keep it. They expected me to add it to the Atlas Holdings war chest. But money obtained from poison is poisonous. I couldn't spend a dime of it. I couldn't let it touch my other accounts. It needed to be purified. I walked out to the terrace where I had once stood with a megaphone saving my son's life. Jerome was there holding a portfolio. "Is it done?" I asked. "It is done," Jerome said, handing me the file. "The papers are filed with the state. The Langston Jefferson Engineering Scholarship Fund is officially a non-profit entity." I opened the folder. The mission statement was clear. Full-ride scholarships for underprivileged black students pursuing degrees in structural and civil engineering. Kids who grew up like I did. Kids who knew that you had to mix the concrete right or the building would fall. Kids who would never dream of stealing from their fathers because they knew the value of a dollar earned with sweat. "It is a lot of money," Langston Jerome said. "You could have bought a yacht." "I don't swim," I said, closing the folder. "And I don't want Tyson's legacy to be a prison sentence. I want his failure to build the foundation for someone else's success. Every time a student graduates on this dime, it will be a victory over his greed. It is the ultimate eviction notice. I am replacing him with 100 sons and daughters who actually respect the work." I looked back at the house one last time. It was just a building now. A shell. The ghosts were gone, evicted by the auctioneer's hammer. I turned away and walked toward the car. I didn't feel sad. I felt clean. The purge was complete. The elevator to the penthouse of the Atlas building was silent and smooth, a testament to perfect engineering. The doors opened directly into the foyer. This was my new home. It wasn't a sprawling estate in the hills designed to impress neighbors. It was a fortress in the sky designed for solitude and strategy. But today it wasn't silent. I smelled coffee. I heard the hum of a vacuum in the distance. Rosa walked into the hallway carrying a stack of mail. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She was wearing a blouse and slacks, clothes she had chosen herself, clothes I had paid for. She stopped when she saw me, a smile lighting up her face. "Mr. Jefferson," she said, "your tea is ready on the balcony," and Mr. Banks called. "He is on his way up." "Thank you, Rosa," I said. I didn't hire her as a maid. I hired her as my household manager. She ran the penthouse. She managed the schedule. She had a staff of her own now. I paid her a salary that made her eyes widen when she saw the first check. But money was just paper. She needed something more. She needed security. The elevator chimed again. Jerome stepped out. He was grinning, a rare expression for a man who spent his life arguing with federal prosecutors. He held a large government envelope in his hand. "Rosa," Jerome said, "come here." Rosa approached, wiping her hands on a cloth out of habit. "Is something wrong, Mr. Banks?" "No," Jerome said. "Everything is right." He handed her the envelope. "We submitted the U visa application under the Victim of Criminal Activity statute," Jerome explained. "You were a witness to a felony and you cooperated with law enforcement to take down a major fraud ring. But because of Langston's connections and the high-profile nature of the case, we got it expedited." Rosa opened the envelope. Her hands trembled. She pulled out a card. It was laminated green and white, permanent resident. She stared at it. She touched her photo. Then she looked at me, tears spilling over her cheeks. "Mr. Jefferson," she whispered, "I can stay. I can bring my daughter." "You saved my life, Rosa," I said, walking over to her. "You warned me when my own blood tried to trap me. You gave me the phone that brought down the cartel connection. This is the least I can do. You are not just staff, Rosa. You are the only family I have left in this house." She dropped the card and hugged me. It was a fierce, desperate hug, the kind that comes from years of fear finally being released. I patted her back awkwardly. I wasn't used to affection. Tyson hadn't hugged me in years, not without looking for my wallet. This was real. This was gratitude. "Go call your daughter," I said gently. "Tell her she is coming to America." Rosa ran to her room, sobbing with joy. Jerome watched her go. "You are a soft touch, Langston," he said. "I am a structural engineer," I corrected him. "I reinforce the supports that hold me up." Rosa is a load-bearing wall. I walked out onto the balcony. The city was spread out below me, a grid of lights and concrete. It was my city. I had helped build it, and now I was watching over it. I stood at the railing, feeling the wind bite at my face. I was 70 years old. I had won the war, but the cost had been total. I had liquidated my past. I had imprisoned my future. I was the king of the castle, but the castle was empty. My phone rang. It wasn't the burner phone. It was my personal cell, restored and encrypted. I checked the screen. It was a number I didn't recognize, with an area code from Arizona. I almost let it go to voicemail. I didn't want to talk to reporters. I didn't want to talk to investors. But something made me answer. Instinct, perhaps. Or maybe the lingering hope that the universe wasn't done with me yet. "This is Langston," I said. There was silence on the other end. Then a woman's voice, hesitant and soft. "Mr. Jefferson." "Yes." "My name is Sarah. You don't know me. I dated Tyson about 5 years ago, before he met Victoria." I stiffened. I remembered Sarah. Tyson had brought her around once. She was a waitress working her way through nursing school. She was kind, she was smart, and Tyson had dumped her the moment his startup got its first round of funding because she didn't fit the image of a tech CEO's wife. "I remember you, Sarah," I said. "Is there something I can do for you?" "I saw the news," she said. "I saw the trial. I saw what he did to you. I didn't know if I should call. I didn't want to get involved in that mess. But when I saw you on TV, when I saw you standing up for the truth, I thought you deserved to know. Know what I asked," gripping the railing. "Tyson left me when I got pregnant," she said. The world stopped spinning. The noise of the city faded into a dull roar. "Pregnant," I repeated. "He told me to get rid of it," she said, her voice gaining strength. "He said a baby would ruin his career. He gave me $5,000 and told me to never contact him again. He said if I told anyone, he would destroy me." I closed my eyes. It sounded exactly like my son. It sounded exactly like the man who would frame his father. "I didn't listen to him," Sarah said. "I kept the money, but I didn't get rid of the baby. I moved to Phoenix. I finished school. I am a nurse now. And the baby," I whispered. "He is 4 years old. Mr. Jefferson, she said. His name is Marcus. I named him after your father. Tyson told me once that your father's middle name was Marcus. It was. My father was a steelworker named John Marcus Jefferson. I have a picture, she said. Can I send it to you? Please, I said. My voice was hoarse. My phone buzzed. I pulled it away from my ear. A photo appeared on the screen. It was a little boy standing in a park holding a toy truck. He had dark skin and a wide smile. But it wasn't the smile that stopped my heart. It was the eyes. They were my eyes. They were the eyes that stared back at me in the mirror every morning. They were the eyes of a Jefferson, intelligent, alert, watching how the world worked. I stared at the image until my vision blurred. Tyson had tried to give me a cradle filled with poison. He had lied about Victoria being pregnant to lure me into a trap. But the grandchild I had mourned, the legacy I thought was lost, had been alive this whole time. Tyson had thrown him away just like he tried to throw me away. Mr. Jefferson, Sarah said, still on the line. I don't want money. I thought Marcus should know where he comes from. I thought he should know he has a grandfather who isn't a criminal. I looked at the city lights again. They looked brighter now. They looked like stars. Sarah. I said, my voice steady and strong. Do you have a lawyer? What? No, why? Because you are going to need one, I said. Not to defend yourself, to protect Marcus. Tyson gave up his rights when he abandoned you, but I am going to make sure that boy never wants for anything in his life. I turned around. Jerome was standing in the doorway watching me. He saw the look on my face. It was the look I had when I designed a skyscraper that could withstand an earthquake. Jerome, I said, covering the microphone. Don't leave yet. What is it? Langston Jerome asked. I just found the next CEO of Atlas Holdings, I said. I went back to the phone. Sarah, pack a bag. I am sending a plane for you. A plane? She asked, shocked. Yes, I said. We have a lot to talk about, and I have a cradle I need to rebuild. I hung up the phone. I looked at the photo of Marcus one more time. My son was in prison. My enemies were destroyed, but my bloodline was free. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in years. I sipped my tea. It tasted like victory. The foundation had held. The storm had passed. And now it was time to build something new, something that would last. I am Langston Jefferson, and I am just getting started. This journey taught me that blood is merely biology, but loyalty is a choice. For decades, I believed that providing financial security was the ultimate act of love, yet it created a monster who valued my wallet over my life. I learned that true wealth is not the billion-dollar portfolio I control, but the integrity to stand alone when the world turns against you. I lost a son who saw me as a transaction, but I gained a daughter in Rosa and a grandson in Marcus who see me as a man. Never mistake silence for weakness, and never build your castle on a foundation of lies. If you believe that justice is worth fighting for no matter the cost, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your own future? I will see you in the next story.